that concerned about money. Good evening. We are calling the Shippensburg Area School District Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So tonight's agenda, I'm going to look at fund balance again for general fund and capital project reserves, review the Act 1 index and formula, revenues and expenditures for this fiscal year and next, go over personnel again, and then have some tax scenarios listed in there and finish with the timeline. Again, this is a slide that we've continuously looked at. This is the general fund balance. The bottom blue section there towards the bottom is the balance as of June 30th, 2024, sitting at $17.2 million for the general fund balance, $590,000 increase from where we were as of 2023. I'll point out again, I pointed out last meeting too, that we have some future capital projects and capital outlay maintenance sections in the general fund balance there towards the middle, which equate to about $7 million. Through sitting in the facilities committee meetings and hearing other board members talk, there's a want to develop a 5-year, 10-year plan down the road. And really these future capital projects, moving them over to a capital projects reserve fund would be beneficial. It would allow us to project better in the general fund balance towards the end of the fiscal year if we move these projects. And really, if we're looking at a 5-year plan, or if we're looking to upgrade our buildings or anything in the district, we should really be padding or putting money towards a capital projects reserve fund each year. So towards the end, I have a line item. Some districts budget like a certain amount in the general fund to transfer over to capital projects each year, whether that's $200,000, $500,000. They transfer over to capital projects. So as you get down the years for these projects, you have money in the reserve fund for those. So I'll get to that later in the later slides. The Act 1 index, so there was some questions regarding around how the adjusted index, the 5.3% for Shippensburg is made up. So there's a little blurb at the top there that goes through the formula. But the state provides the market value personal income aid ratio to us. And then you add, if it's below 0.4, then you can only raise taxes to the base index, what the state provides. So at the bottom, the state index is 4% for next year. So you can see CV, Cumberland Valley is below the 0.4 aid ratio, so they can only go up to 4%. Whereas us, we're at 0.5847. So the formula is you take the 0.5847 and you add it to 0.75, and that gets you to about 1.33. You add the 1.33 to the base index from the state, which is 4%. So 4% plus the 1.3 gets you our adjusted index of 5.3% for Shippensburg.
Just a question on the fund balance. I didn't realize you were moving on. Weren't we several million below going into the end of the year, and then we ended up 500,000 above. Have we figured out what the main accountability that was, or what?
So I can bring the audits. Are you talking about this slide right here, the 590,000?
Yeah.
To the good. Yeah, I can bring the audit slide back up. Some of that was additional state revenue that came in. That the state passes their budget much later than what we do. So depending on what we budget for subsidy money that comes through, we could see a very big increase from the state if they do pass.
And we also got equity money we were not expecting. So
this year we did, yeah.
So that was a big part of it. So we had that deficit. We got equity money meant to square away.
What is that exactly?
The cyber stuff, the cyber costs.
Okay.
We had to pass the resolution to stay at the index in order to get that money. And then I think we had a good
Additional
year.
basic ed and special ed. Yep.
So the governor's budget was particularly better than it typically is, particularly when you added the equity money into it. Okay, this year not so much, or at least the preliminary indications are that it's not. Although we are still going to, I believe strongly that we're still getting equity money like we did last year. So last year the governor's budget better than normal, equity money that helped along with our debt service buffer, I'll call it, that we're paying ourselves the debt service that we have built in, along with some fairly strong revenue,
Yes.
Revenue gathering. Our revenues came in better than expected, so we landed, from a projected deficit on the positive side.
So this wasn't the $3.5 million. This was going from 2023, June 2023 to June 2024. So this was, I think the deficit for this was about 1.7, 1.8. I'll have to go back and look. But this year we were projecting a $3.5 million deficit for this budget that we're living currently. I have some, go to my revenue slide here. So this is kind of a mid-level view of the revenue that's come in so far. There is about 4 years of past data there. And then the budget numbers for this year, a year-to-date column through February for 24-25, and then what we're projecting for 25-26 next year. This is with a 0% tax increase. I'll get to a little bit more about the taxes. It goes in more depth on the next slide. But there's not many increases to revenue, just on the tax side is assumed growth rate. Both Franklin County and Cumberland County are growing in Shippensburg, so there's an assumed growth built in there for next year. The investment earnings are up a little bit, and then I kept the subsidy from the state flat, as there's not much coming from the state other than the adequacy money, which I'll get to in the next slide. And then federal we'll also talk about in a future slide. But the chart on the right there, you can see our local revenue makes up about 60% of the budget, state about 39%, and federal is about 2%. So this looks into a deeper view into the local revenue. So you can see the real estate there at the top. That's your real estate taxes. That just has an assumed growth, 0% tax increase, which is about a $450,000 increase from last year's budget. Interim, the way it's been trending is bumped up a little bit along with interest earnings. There's also the earned income tax. That's been trending up the past couple years. That's one of our big local revenues. The $6.3 million was budgeted this year. We've gotten in about $3.7 million of that through February. So we're going to monitor that over the next couple months to see how that comes in. Usually these next couple months to close out the school year are pretty strong for earned income tax.
Is that usually from like warehouses or population, both?
So earned income tax, yeah, it's like workers, what you get off your paycheck for earned income tax. So that could help if there's additional jobs here. But there's like the delinquent real estate tax and the transfer tax. Those are trending about average. So that's what you're seeing. Like if a warehouse or something would come on, you would see additional money there. But to my knowledge, I haven't heard of any new warehouses yet. So keeping that flat for now. I will point out the IDEA pass-through towards the bottom there, about $752,000. That's local revenue, but it's really considered federal revenue that we get from the CAIU, the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. So that's money we get back in tuition costs. I'm just mentioning that because in my future slides I have the federal revenue laid out. But if the Department of Ed gets abolished or something happens where we don't get that funding, I just want to make it known that that $752,000, if the state doesn't come through with more money, could go away as well.
But that doesn't eliminate the mandates, right? Even if they eliminate.
The
Kind of-
unfunded mandates will still continue.
So the taxpayer's gonna catch it at the bottom.
Correct.
So that's really in an unknown state right now, what's going to happen with the Department of Ed. Just putting it out there because it could happen or something could happen to revenue we do receive. Moving on to the state revenues, I kept the subsidies, basic ed, and special ed costs flat as there wasn't much increase in the governor's budget. Still waiting to see from the legislator what's going to happen if there will be an increase. If there was, it's about a $250,000 increase, a 1% increase for special ed and basic ed was proposed by the governor. I did put in, so Bill mentioned about the adequacy money there at the bottom. The state is going to provide that again, so it's the 1.2 million. So that's the money where the lawsuit where the state was not adequately funding school districts. This was their way of giving more to those schools that were not adequately funded. So there's 1.2 million for next year's budget in there. The Social Security and retirement both have a slight increase, and that's just due to when wages increase, so do those reimbursements from the state. So state revenue is sitting at about 27.6 million for next year. We'll wait to see over the next couple months if there's any new information coming from the state regarding these subsidies. This is the small amount of money we get from federal compared to our, our total budget size, the 1.1 million. So if the Department of Ed does go away, we could, if the state doesn't provide it, we could not see this moving forward. But we're still waiting on some news from there. Switching gears to the expense side. So these bullet points have kind of been a theme over the past couple presentations of what our drivers are for the expense. The personnel needs with the increasing enrollment, contractual increases to salaries. That's a bit of an unknown still with the teacher's contract being negotiated currently. So we don't really have a set increase to put in for next year. So that's still an estimate as of right now. Medical insurance projected increase of about 10%, which equates to $800,000. Cyber charter enrollment and tuition costs, and then also transportation costs have increased about 1.3 million since 21-22.
So just a question.
Sure.
So with the medical insurance, didn't it also increase midway through the year, like this past year as well?
The medical insurance renewed last year for about 15.4% was the increase last year. On average, over the past 10 years, it's increased about 5.4. So really, last year and this year have been huge increases comparative to what we've seen on average over the past 10 years.
Well, that's everything, isn't it? Not just fuel, everything increased, salaries and everything else.
Right.
Not just fuel.
I'll get to a little bit more in depth about expense, but Dr. Lyman asked about our per pupil spend. So I found this on the PDU website. The most recent year they had was 2022, 2023. I listed the Franklin and Cumberland County School Districts there. You can see the average daily membership for each of the school districts there in the first column, and then it goes through the expense, the average expense throughout like the instruction per ADM, support services per ADM. And then the far right column goes over the total expense per ADM. You can see we're towards the bottom, but we're relatively, pretty close to the middle. We're at $17,000 per ADM.
There's some surprises there.
At the top, or yeah.
And we're above Cumberland Valley.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the ADMs too, like how many students there. But you're right. You're right. So expenditures by function or department. Again, this, like the revenue, I went back 4 years and provided actual numbers. And then I have the budget for this year, 24-25, and then the year-to-date through February, and then the budget for next year. Now, a lot of these increases are solely, which I'll get to next on the next slide, is just solely salary and benefits for next year. There is a slight increase in the business operations maintenance, and that's just for utility costs and average increases over the years. Transportation, I also put an increase of about $200,000 there. You can see what we've been trending. About $3 million in 21-22 is what we spent on transportation. You can see our budgeted number for this year is 4.1. We've already, through February, we've already spent 2.8 million of that. So with the unknown of the contract, I put a slight increase towards transportation.
What's the biggest driver of that? No pun intended.
The opening of the contract was around that time, I believe, two years ago.
But the increase is just more on the road, or I don't know, is there a combination of,
So, Mr. Bybee will be here later this evening.
okay, yep.
I can say that, fuel prices for a lot of, did increase dramatically, for everyone. I know that was one driver, for sure.
Yeah, I know we did add a bus or two as well, yeah.
Each bus is north of $100,000 that we add, maybe more. So as our population grows, busing is also another factor.
Because I remember out in South Wind, I was on transportation board, and they were complaining because they only had one bus going out to South Wind. Now we think we got 4 buses out there to pick up kids, and it's going to get more buses out there.
It is pretty remarkable, though, looking at that transportation budget. Like, you looked at 2021, I mean, not quite 50% more, but maybe 45% more. I mean, that,
Well, just remember that was COVID, so we weren't running a ton of buses.
Yeah.
well, the next year, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I don't know what 19 looked like, but yeah,
It's still a hefty increase from 21-22 relative to what we're seeing this year. And then at the bottom, the other financing debt, that's our flat debt service. So when we talk about that, we're budgeting higher than what we're paying for debt to keep that buffer in there. If we need to borrow more money in the future, we already have that built into the budget. So this lists it out by object, expenditures by object. Same kind of chart. It just dives deeper into the wages and benefits and other categories of the budget. So you can see the biggest increases there are the wages and benefits. With the unknowns of the teacher contracts, this could fluctuate, especially on the wages side. The benefit side is mostly due to that medical insurance increase, and then also additional staff and the PESER's retirement rate increasing from 33.9 to 34%. And as wages go up, so does what you pay towards retirement. The other one I should look at there is the 500, the tuition, transportation. Again, don't want to beat a dead horse, but the transportation cost increase, and then the charter school tuition costs are also increasing there. You can see our budget number for this year is about 12.2 million. We've already spent 8.4 million of that.
So that's where the charter tuition comes.
Yep,
That's in that.
that's in that line item. Yep.
Hey, Caleb, quick question. Just looking at the bottom, the totals, that year that dropped from like 60 million down to 55, is that maybe as an impact of like one-time monies with ESSER funds, I'm guessing?
Yeah, yep. That, and then also you can see that 9 million in the 900 level. So there was a refinancing of a bond. So that kind of skews the budget number a little bit there, or what actually came in. because the audit, you have to put a journal entry in the expense side to filter out the revenue side. So that 9.3 skews it a little bit. But yes, some ESSER money offset as well.
This,
And
this may not be super. Do we have? I don't know. How does our sort of teacher workforce balance out? Do we have a lot of? Are we heavier on the more experienced end or on the new end, or is it?
We
sort of
we
all
actually
across?
know that answer pretty well. We are 68% of our staff are at the top of our salary schedule, depending on their credits. Masters plus 30. So we are top heavy. Now, I say that with an asterisk because we have a 10-step scale. So that after 10 years, you're at the top anyway, but I would say 68% of our staff are at least 10 years with us or experienced than not.
Which is great, but also expensive.
It's great in non-negotiation years.
I will say the other point, and to why I brought up in the beginning about the key to use that capital reserve fund is because that also skews these numbers a little bit too. So like say if you're to do a roof project and it comes out of that general fund balance, that shows up in our expense side of our general fund. So that could also skew the numbers a little bit if you're looking at that 400 or 700 object level.
If we went by what you're saying, which I understand, would that affect how big a hit would the fund balance take?
So it depends on how much you want to transfer over to that capital reserve.
All right.
But if you're padding it each year, you can put a line item in the general fund budget. We can put in whatever amount, like $200,000, $300,000 each year, so we're planning for the future in that capital reserve fund.
Much like we do with debt service, like currently, we're paying more than we currently have. Like it's just coming up with the will to put a number that then is transferred into this capital projects fund. So that's a way of growing it so that when we get these projects or we get roofs, we're not taking from the general fund. So, the flexibility, I believe Caleb told me, was when it sits in the general fund, we can use it with more flexibility. When it goes over to this side, like we're saying we're spending this on either debt service or our facilities. So
Once you transfer it from the general fund to capital projects, you can't go back to the general fund.
Well, is there a need to go back to the general fund once because it's obligated to that?
Right.
So why you need to go back to the general fund?
Right. Yeah. If your fund balance is in a good state, I would say there's no need for it to go back. And even if you do get in a pinch, they allow you to pay your debt service out of that. So if we were to get in a pinch, we could pay 1.2 or 1.5 million of our debt service out of capital projects.
Just say we put $250,000 a year, and with a bigger project, maybe adding on like we did in high school, I know we could add money to buffer that bond. Correct?
Possibly, yeah, you won't have to borrow as much money. That could be the case.
It must be like Gettysburg did. Gettysburg started putting money aside.
A lot of districts do that.
Yeah. Then when it came time for
and I mean theoretically there is money put aside in the general fund balance.
But it always
So so we could slide it over, but then it limits our ability. And with choppy waters ahead, we just have to be prudent about how much we slide over. But I think as we look at how do we build it for the future, like we've got to fund our capital projects line items so that we can do the projects, whether it's maintenance or bigger issues, so we can match up our, we've done that. We have a facilities need list that we're ticking off, Jamesburg roof being one of them. But as you build that list out and prioritize it, then you have to go on the finance side to find out where the money's coming from, and being disciplined into putting money into that fund so that you have it to do these ancillary things or bigger projects down the line.
So I think Fred just made this clear, but I want to make sure I understand as well that so that money could be used obviously for projects to build stuff, but it could also be used to pay for debt service where we needed to take a loan to build bigger stuff if we couldn't afford it with
Correct.
the money that we have cash on hand,
Yep, correct,
or to reduce what we have to lend.
correct.
Okay. But it reminds me of like a retirement fund, like you can put it in there, but there are some stipulations about when you can pull it out and you might have to, okay.
Yeah, it's more so like you have a plan, like, you know, a 5-year, 10-year plan, like we have the stadium going in. You know, that's going to need updates as the years go on. So putting money aside each year for that, for projects like that and upkeep.
How do we get that projection? I think it came up fine in the facility meeting. How do we get that set up for a projection so that we can foresee it, be prepared for the future?
So we have already done that to a certain extent, Fred. It may need updated at some point, but there was already, you know, with this first, you know, swath of construction, a feasibility study. You know, there's a list that sits in Curtis' office, I believe, of what the priorities are, you know, in the different buildings and the different systems. It's really just matching up the financing for that so that those two are aligned and we can tick them off, but still putting monies into the fund that would allow us to do it.
And Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems to match with what we were talking about in the policy committee meeting where, because you were talking about like, and we'll talk about it later with the committee meetings, that there's this, I think we would like to be able to have that forward thinking kind of planning kind of mentality a little more. So we're more proactive and less reactive. And now you're telling us there's a way to fund that kind of planning. So I think there's a nice convergence of ideas here.
It doesn't help our bottom line in choppy waters that we're in. You know, it's just a matter of you know, budgets are value documents. You know, so like, what do we value, and where are we going to put those items in the budget?
You know, and districts also, like if they have a surplus, like we did from 23 to 24, if you end up to the good, you know, the state provides more money. Sometimes they transfer over that $590,000 that we were to the good on. Sometimes they'll just transfer that or a certain amount of that into the capital projects fund. That's another way to fund it, not just the budget each year.
How do we do this? Talking about it. How do we proceed?
So, to Fred's question, I had actually had this on part of my discussion or questions at the end.
Okay.
Is there a certain percentage that other districts are just allocating to that fund to just help us
Yeah.
know, like, because we have all of the wants of, you know, personnel, but we also know that we need to be more proactive with planning for facilities.
Right.
Is there a certain amount that some districts are allocating from their budget to that line item?
Right. Yeah, I can definitely look into that. I think it varies depending on school size and what the needs are of the district. But I've seen, you know, anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 be budgeted the general fund side. But I think it's also taking a look at what that 5-year maintenance plan that Curtis has, looking at that and seeing what, you know, what the needs are for the next couple of years, and I think maybe basing it off of that too, of what the estimated spend might be for those type of projects that need done that are upcoming. But I can definitely take a look at what other districts are budgeting for.
Would you look at Gettysburg, please, for me?
Yeah.
Because I know they set money aside and they were able to help with the high school. They offset a lot of money, and now they also with their budget, I think it's a flat. There every year, everybody knows how much they're going to have to pay for taxes, 2% or 3%, not the up and down that we go.
Right.
But would you look at that, please?
so personnel. So I also included this list that was talked about last meeting too. The six, or however you want to look at it, about $500,000 of these personnel items I have in the current budget that I just presented. So, and the board priorities, the 9 and 10 are also listed there too. I don't know if Mr. August wants to speak to the personnel, or if there's any discussion
Sure.
regarding.
Just please understand that the list from the building is larger than what you see here. Okay. And you know, the orange or peach is currently in the budget numbers you've seen. That there's the ask on those others are needs, but in terms of trying to pare down the pare down, you know, this is where we are. You know, we will need some guidance on, you know, on adding the 7 through 10. You know, if we're committed to doing that, obviously it's going to have an impact on the budget. You know, and it's, you know, so the total addition is there at the bottom. I think you said there's what about
Around, yeah, close to $500,000.
so about little over half of it is already in the numbers you've seen. Okay, so if the priority is 7, 8, 9, 10, then that number coming up is going to go up by that amount.
Or on the special ed part on the coaches. In the last few, how many special ed coaches have we hired in the last few?
Okay, so we don't have we currently have an auxiliary contract with someone who comes in to help with IEP compliance, Fred. Okay, so that's a separate contract. We're already paying it, and that individual comes and supports the special ed program. You may recall from my updates that our staffing for special ed, based on the size of our district and our special ed population, like we are, I would say, severely understaffed in the special ed side. Okay, so that position is not a new position. It is moving that supplemental contract that we have with that individual to a full-time position. Okay, so it's you know that's why it's not the full $110,000 that the other ones are.
So but we pay him already, so that's just added $70,000 to that.
So that person is part-time, Fred. So, you know, we only get, I would stretch to say even part-time. They have a certain cap of hours that we're contracted with them.
I remember that.
So by bringing that in-house, we get them full-time to meet the needs of that population. And we're just a tick under 21 or 22% special ed.
I just wonder when Mrs. What was her name was here?
But it's a little hard to hear you.
I just remember who was the special ed instructor we had here. Just left.
This is Zima?
Yeah, Ms. Zima. She said eventually it would be cost effective for us to do all this in-house, all this special ed stuff in-house. Are we getting close to where is?
So Fred, we put in star what we call star classrooms at the intermediate, the middle school, and the high school. Okay, we previously only had it at the middle school. That is kind of like a hidden cost savings. So every kid that can go into that program that we don't have to send out to a placement is a savings to the district. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah,
So we are keeping some of that in-house. Some of the programs are pretty intensive, and we may not have enough of our own kids to run it or the space to put it in. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers. I understand.
And not to interrupt you again, but we did add an ABA class, an autism class, last year. So that's an in-house savings that we have. You know, when I say savings, it's in quote. We're still paying for a teacher, but we're not paying to put those students in different placements. So it's not something we can do overnight. We certainly can't do it with the entire population that we would send out to placements, but where it makes sense and there's cost effectiveness to it, to have our own program in-house, and if we have space, you know, we have done that.
That's what I understand. I have no problem with your rational. I just want to make sure the kids that are special needs get everything they need from us, and we're not able to supply it.
So there are IEPs in place that make sure that happens, Fred. We either have to do it ourselves or contract out to get the
So we
services.
still
that they
contract
need.
out.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say that we're at 20, 21?
We're north of 20%
of
special
in
ed.
the districts that are,
Yeah, and that's typical for Cumberland County. You know, we're like right in the mix.
okay.
Yeah.
Is that trending up as well?
That is trending up for sure.
I mean, it's obvious, like elementary teacher, we know that that's elementary. But like SLP, just to make sure we're clear, like that's district-wide.
So speech and language, so that's an example of something that we have been adding speech pathologists when we go over our caseloads, because they can only have so many students on their caseload. That would be a case where we're contracting them out and we're paying a premium for that. So we get to a tipping point with case loads and how much we're paying for contracted services that it makes sense to bring that position in-house. You know, it's not exactly, you know, a one-for-one savings, but, you know, we are, again, when we have to contract out, we're always paying I would say a premium for that service.
Yeah. And then for number 6, like the counselor reading specialist, like where would that counselor be?
So right now, this is a G Blues story. So G Blues' population now is reflective of the district as a whole. Okay, I think back in the past it may have been a little bit different, but that building has the same needs that we're seeing in all the elementary schools. So, you know, they're in need of, you know, you may remember from last year's ESSER's, you know, shuffle. You know, we were able to get some reading help there. However, the need for additional reading help is there. Plus, there isn't a specific district counselor who goes to G Blues every day. There's, you know, because of our relationship with the university, you know, there's support there, and our staff kind of oversee that. But given the needs there as well, you know, so that is kind of a counselor or reading specialist. What is, you know, it would be great if we could find someone that could do both. They probably don't exist. So we're going to have to look on one side of that, at what the higher need is, you know, to be able to support, you know, G Blues enough to meet those kids' needs.
All right, I have one more, and then I'm done.
Sure.
Number 8, the business teacher one. Of course, we talked about it last time, how it was a mandate. There's no funding that came with it, at least as of yet. But it doesn't start until not this fall, but the next. But everyone's going to be, like, how hard is it going to be to find someone who's certified in that?
So business teachers are not, I would say, prevalent. It's not. It's a highly competitive cert to hire.
Yeah.
I do believe the language of that was written that it doesn't have to be exclusively taught by a business teacher. You know, the hope is that you know, with a business teacher, you know, they're going to be serving every student. So I don't know. I think their schedule is going to be pretty tight. But if there's excess there with a business teacher, we can expand, you know, our internship, you know, job work experiences as well, theoretically.
And then I lied. I have one more. So with that, do we, and this is more curriculum based, but do we know what, like at what grade level is that mandated from the state?
So it's not, we're going to have to put it in, it has to be in place. I think we're going to have to put it in with like 9th grade.
And looking down at 9 and 10, it is not looking good, I take it.
So they're board priorities. You know, certainly we can add them. You know, they're on the list, Fred.
Well,
But we have to make like a definitive, because when we get to some of the later slides, like, you know, you have to kind of keep that in mind. They absolutely can be in there. You know, they've been identified as priorities. We're just going to have to, as a board, you know, commit to them as we move forward. Any other? Go ahead.
Moving on to the implications to the taxpayer. So this is for the increase to the index of 5.3%. I added in the new millage rates at the top for 25, 26, the recent ones that we've received from Cumberland and Franklin. You can see the median assessed value for Cumberland would come in at about $11 a month increase if we were to go to the index. And then for Franklin County, it would probably be around $10 to $11.
Wow, it's even.
Yeah, so that doesn't factor in the equalization. So, but the equalization is not what it was like last year. It's very, very relative, like the same. I think Cumberland drops a little bit. I can put that in next, but it's a very minimal drop, and Franklin a very minimal increase compared to last year.
It looks like it should look, I guess, is what, from my perspective at least.
And that's at the index, right? Is that up to the index?
Correct.
So here's three budget scenarios. Scenario 1 has a 0% tax increase. Scenario 2 has a 2.6% increase. And then scenario 3 has a 5.3% increase to the index. I put at the top there, the tax increase to the index of 5.3% generates roughly about $1.8 million in revenue. That's with a 95% collection rate. And then also, that does not have in the assumed growth that I had in my previous slide. So the assumed growth that we're seeing in Franklin and Cumberland is projected to generate about $500,000 for next year. So you can see scenario 1, the expenditures and revenues with a deficit of about $4.5 million, and then you add in that flat debt service line where we're budgeting higher than what we're actually spending for debt. Factor that in, and then factor in the additional personnel from that slide we just had. So the additional personnel that was not already in these slides. So an additional $430,000. And then a transfer I just put in there to capital projects of what we talked about previously. This can all be discussed and taken out of $200,000. Would leave us with about $4.1 million deficit.
So just to be clear, Caleb, so the additional personnel is in that number,
The additional personnel, so the,
not just the ones that were in Peach.
Right.
All 9 of them are represented here.
correct, would be represented in those numbers. Yeah, all 10 of those.
Okay.
So 1 through 6 were in the budget slides. 7 through 10 on that last slide would make up the additional $430,000 of additional personnel to get us down to about a $4.1 million deficit if we were to raise taxes at 0%, or not raise taxes. Scenario 2 with the 2.6%, same deal with the bottom, but we have a $3.2 million deficit, and then as we move to the right, we have a $2.3 million deficit we raise to the index. Now, this is with aggressive numbers, or not aggressive, but like estimates for salaries and wages. Like I said, we're still in negotiations with the teacher contract, so with some unknowns there, we could see a little bit of a decrease in the wages and benefits, but we just have to let that part play out before we set in stone the salary and benefit piece of it.
So you said the growth stuff you're talking about is not, so we could take a 500.
Well, that is built in.
That is.
Yeah, that was built into my slides. Yeah, the assumed growth is
Is that built in
500,000.
here?
Correct. Yeah, those. Yeah. So the expenditures of 75.4 million. That's what I showed in the previous slides, and then the revenues of 70.8 is what I showed in the previous slide, and then that's with the tax scenario 2 and 3 are with the tax increase added into those revenues.
But this is getting 0 from the government, or from the governor.
Right. That's another thing. Yes. 0 per. Yeah.
So this assumes flat.
0 additional from. Yeah.
But remember, if I'm wrong, Caleb, correct me, the governor's budget spoke about a 1% increase.
Right. It looks pretty bleak as of right now. I'm attending the PASBO conference later this week, so hopefully I can get some more insight on what they're thinking down in Harrisburg. But as of right now, it's not. We're not going to see too large of an increase from what his budget presentation said.
Because what he's asking is 1% and he still has to fight it through the legislature.
He's got to fight to get the 1%.
Yes. And so we'll be lucky to get 1%, which is pretty flat.
Correct.
I would just remind the board that Cumberland County budgets for other districts are also not good. I think Carlisle's is
5 million.
5 million. Cumberland Valley's is 5 million, I believe,
Yeah.
in deficit. So it's not like like everybody else in Cumberland Valley. The Cumberland Valley is booming, and we are not in terms of our budget.
And I will say, for school districts, they're not dealing with the enrollment growth that Shippensburg has been seeing over the years. If anything, their enrollments are trending downward, some of the schools in Cumberland.
I think one other thing, and I mean, if anyone follows local news, that's kind of what you just said. Like, there's other districts that are talking about cutting programs and opportunities from kids, and I don't believe that anybody on this board or administration has advocated for that, correct?
So we have not at this point.
Yeah, which is a good thing, in my mind.
I mean, you could argue, that those additional positions are some opportunities that could be an opportunity cost. Yeah, but they're baked into that number, just to be clear, they're in that number.
We go through this every year, and nothing you can do, superintendent. Nothing. But we're here making decisions with money we don't even know we're going to get, or we got, or how are we going to tax.
So we control that 60% of the
The local dollars.
the local revenue is all we control.
I understand. I'm not holding you because I've been through this enough times, and it's just very frustrating that I'm sitting here in April going through a whole hour budget meeting that may not be here in May. It doesn't make sense to me that can't be corrected. And I'm not blaming neither one of you or the board or nothing. It's just frustrating for me to sit here and go through this for 5 years and nothing's accomplished. It just sucks.
It makes no sense that the state passes their budget. They have a deadline of June 30th, but it's never even passed by June 30th. While we have to pass
500
ours.
school districts, you figure that's a lot of people, a lot of affected in the state that's being affected by this.
They should pay us more to make these decisions, shouldn't they?
Huh?
They should pay us more to make these decisions,
I
shouldn't
give up the
they?
money if they just make a decision. just don't.
I don't know if you saw that bottom number there, Mrs. Emerly.
It is a double standard, though. Like, they make us make the tough decisions, but then they kick the can. But at the state and federal level, they kick the can down the road all the time.
They got state. They said legislators have a $300 and some million fund that they just keep for incidentals, and we're out just struggling trying to find things for our community.
So I think this board really has, dealt with, 2 years, a few years ago, dealt with 2 straight years of no tax increase. And then with the enrollment incline that was in my presentation last meeting of how, the past couple of years of how that's increased. So, that increases your expenses, obviously, when enrollment goes up. So paired with the no tax increases for 2 straight years, and then the ESSER money too, the federal money, that falling off too. I mean, we were in the thick of it. You were in the thick of it the past couple of years of having to raise taxes to the index. But I think, there's eventually going to be some light at the end of the tunnel where we don't have to go to the index each year, as long as the enrollment
If I don't,
levels off.
if we don't raise it's 5.3. If we raise to 5.3, we still be a $2 million deficit.
Right.
So that money that we don't get this year is the money we'll never get. I guess Superintendent, that's the money we will never get.
Correct. And I think the numbers from that double no tax year amount to $1.7 million out of the budget. If we had gone to the index those years, I'd say so. It's somewhere between $0 and $1.6 million every year that's not in our budget.
If I
Some
don't
of our.
even-
Sorry, Fred, were you done?
Huh?
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I was just thinking to myself, I voted for no increase. Now I'm looking here at what I've cost the school district with that vote.
And I would just say, Fred, like, depending on what the reality is, 1 year of no tax increase is doable if you have solid fund balance and maybe even appropriate. it's the back-to-backs that are really tough because it's just money you never get back.
Just go ahead, Dr. Lyman.
Do some of the growth, though, I would assume comes with new housing, which would also come with some increased revenue as well. So growth isn't always, yes, it's more students to serve and so on and so forth, but there would also be some associated revenue growth with
Right.
if there is new housing.
The key for us is going to be we got to get a point where we have to stop adding staff, but we're not quite there yet. We're still lagging behind the growth that we saw, so that when that happens, our revenue will more likely catch up to our expenditures because that is our single largest item in our budget. But right now, I spent my afternoon looking at the enrollment data out, and talking about the planning that we'll have to do facility wise and staff wise. But we've done enough at the elementary that we're just dealing with the bubble right now. Like it's just the strategy to deal with that 3-year bubble through our system. So we've added teachers on the back end, and then depending on those roles, we may have some flexibility where we can move some personnel where we're not hiring, we're just shifting. And I'm looking forward to that time when we don't have to hire, and we can shift so that we can allow those revenues to catch up with expenditures. Unless the board, gives some direction that class size, we rethink how we value class size. Like that's the other way to not add staff is to be comfortable with, large class sizes.
Okay. So, I mean, we've talked about the back-to-back years of no increases, but this is just for some context to this. We know those years were 19, 20, and 2021. In just going back, in 2018, the Act 1 adjusted index for Shippensburg was 3.3. The board at the time voted to vote 1/3 to the index. So we left out 66% of what we could have had of an index that is low compared to what you look at what we've had now. Went to 2/5 of the index the year before that. The year before that, it was to the index at 2.5, to the index to 2.7. It was 2.2, we went to 3/4 of the index. When it was 2.2, we went to half the index. There's one down here. We went to one half of the index at 5.4, 1/4 of the index to 5.9, 2/3 of the index to 4.5. So, I mean, when I see numbers that, like, I would love to see an adjusted Act 1 index that was 3%. Like, that would be wonderful if that's what we were selling to people or we were, going to do it. But, like, it wasn't just those 2 years. Like, this is a constant buildup over time. And, again, like, I know I've myself mentioned, like, those back-to-back years. Like, you look back at it, you think, wow, like, we understand the times we were in, but, like, that's completely back. That hurts. But it wasn't just those 2 years. The history of Shippensburg is when you see a 3.3% Act 1 and you go 1/3 of that, you basically have done essentially no tax increase, is the way I look at that.
And to continue that story, I mean, you go back to that slide that has the expenses per student, and you look at some of our neighboring districts who have not made those decisions over time. And over time, they've, continually hit the index or just shy of it. And they're in a much better situation. So we are definitely playing catch up.
And as our staffing, I think the return on investment for where we were was great. In terms of our expenditure versus some of our our achievement as well. But as we've grown, like you can only ride that ship for so long before you have to keep up with the enrollment.
I can't help but every time we look at these to think of Mr. Burt and his per pupil spending, and he would have the whole list. And while it says we are in the middle, it was more so like we were at the bottom, 10, 5?
10%. We're the bottom list. 10.
Like, so, I mean, again, catch up.
But just a broader comment. I guess we're over time, so maybe we
Well, I mean, it's kind of important. So we kind of have to get to the meat of the discussion.
Just continue then. I won't say anything.
So, I mean, there was already some discussion regarding around personnel and tax increase scenario. We're getting to the timeline of, April, where we have to seek board approval of proposed final budget in that second meeting in April. We'll have to pass a proposed final budget. Again, that can change. We just have to advertise a proposed final budget, but that can still change until we pass the final budget come June.
So some decisions we have to make around personnel is that prioritized list that had board priorities and building priorities, and instructional priorities. Is the board comfortable having all those positions in this budget?
Until I know what's going. I mean,
Well, Fred, you've seen the impact. Like that's the number.
but if we get more money from the state surplus,
So I would say we are not counting on any more money from the state, Fred. We're getting a 1% increase at best.
So, one other question, because of all the talk around the Department of Ed on the news, is it possible that, is there a timeline on when the Department of Education could possibly be dissolved and that we wouldn't receive that $1.1
So what I've
million and what that would look like for Shippensburg?
I think that's very much still up in the air. What I've heard is that dissolving the Department of Ed at the federal level, all that title money, that 1.7 that we get, would still go to the states, and the states would decide how to distribute that money. Beyond that, and that's not set in stone. That's just things I've read and conversations I've had, is that money's not necessarily going to go away, but it's not going to be administered by the Department of Education directly.
if I'm sorry, Kurt, you said?
No, yes, I think the administration typically shows they want to give power back to the states. So even if they do that, I would think they would still distribute the monies and say, hey, it's yours to deal with, yours to work with.
I think another scenario is that and it would depend on the individual programs. Some of those programs might move to another federal agency and still be federal. Some might go to the states, but I think some, I don't know that it's like a move to just get rid of all federal funding for schools.
If we make a decision on the budget and we do financial, the budget is passed, and we find that we have the resource and the financial ability to hire a couple of these positions, like the swimming and if we find out after we pass the budget that we do have money available for these positions, can we add them then?
So, Fred, I think that the question I would think, and I would defer to Caleb, is we really have to see how this budget ends.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but we're not going to know that until.
Yep, I mean,
I understand that, but after the budget's passed, and you say there can be changes, then if we find out there is a surplus down the road, could we add these positions that we're not going to put in now?
We can. The timing is important, Fred. That in that high school schedule's already built, elementary schedules are built. I mean, we could make it work. It's just better to know ahead of time so that we can have the plan and the schedules at all the levels built out.
And would it,
I feel like for the teachers, you can't do that because you have to plan those schedules, but with, those secretarial positions or whatever, you could potentially do that.
So can you explain the reasoning behind moving some of the high school secretary positions to full-time? Like, I totally get like the special ed secretary with all of the
Sure.
having 20%.
So you, in the current high school project, it was a priority to install another entrance in the back to allow kids to buzz in, and not have to walk around to the front. So one of two things has to happen. We have to station someone there, or we have to have, and this is the solution that we've come up with, we have a camera that would be connected to the front office, and have someone buzz in. So everybody in the office already has a full-time job. We have a person whose role is to greet and let people in the building. When everything's in the front, when that person goes home, there is still an ability to buzz people in on that. But it's not practical to have someone do two entrances and their jobs at the same time, monitoring a buzz in to the back of the building. Plus, if you were to talk to the high school administration, we often have to supplement their secretarial staff with overtime to get things done that need to get done. And this has been on, Mrs. Luffy's list every year since I've been here. But the camera itself and having someone to monitor in that from the beginning of the school to the end of the school day, as already happens with the front door, that's the rationale behind it. We either have to move somebody back there, and someone's got to sit there full time to let these kids who come in intermittently, or we expand that position that already exists and get better mileage out of it, and allow kids to not have to walk around the building.
But they're going to still sit out front.
Yeah,
They're going to still sit
so the way in order to not have to build like an office back here, that we're going to solve it with technology. There's going to be a camera. There's going to be a buzz in.
Well, but I'm sort of lost there. The camera and buzz in going to be in the front now. I mean, we could do that right now without. I don't have no problem hiring the person. There's more work and overtime than make her full time. I have no problem. I just don't understand the rationale of doing it because we need somebody back.
So they're going to be looking at two doors, Fred. That like they're going to be doing the main door and the back door, and then the ancillary additional support that goes on in the office. Because otherwise, someone who's having to do attendance and is working at their desk is going to have to buzz in.
I'm more comfortable with the workload. You telling me that?
Is this position going to be reopened, or will just be extended to the person that's
Extended to the person that's in it.
Okay, and can you explain the reasoning for the middle school secretary to go to full time?
Yes, given the size of the building, one secretary. So there's 2.5 people in the middle school. There's one that works in the guidance office, handling the guidance side. There's an attendance secretary and a half-time kind of part-time person that deals with kids and phones and things like that. So for the size of the building, it is appropriate for there to be 3 secretaries there. I came from a middle school that was smaller, but was staffed that way.
So there's 3 part-time secretaries, and we're only making them one.
No. So there's 2.5.
2 full-time.
2 full-time.
So which one would be going full-time?
The one that's currently half-time.
Can I go back to the buzzing in thing?
Yes.
So when we have the back entrance, does that mean that a student would buzz in there but then report to the front office?
So typically that's used for our kids who are going to internships. They're kind of a known presence. So we haven't worked out all the details, but the thought is, Mrs. Metcalf would know them and would be able to buzz them in.
So like that's mainly for students returning to school entrance.
From SHIP.
Not me coming to pick
Right.
up my kid at school.
Right. All the pickups are going to happen still up front. All the parent interactions. This is simply not having kids park there and walk around the building.
I just don't know if I'm like super keen on the idea of having someone up here monitoring this door, especially with cameras and blind spots. Like I don't know that I love that idea.
I hear you.
It doesn't make sense for one person to sit there. It doesn't make sense for one person to sit there and buzz kids in. I mean,
So either way, there's going to be someone looking at a monitor to let somebody in.
And you're saying there's not a space back here for that, really?
Not that I think we would want to use for that purpose. We with the shifting of things, we have the opportunity to have like a small conference room, which was vitally needed as well to hold meetings and IEP meetings. And if worst comes to worst, storage, which we're always short on, but I doubt we would use that. So some way we have to figure out how to get kids buzzed in through the back.
been saying
That's
for
the solution that we have currently that we feel is most cost effective and efficient. Other questions on personnel? Other discussions on the budget?
One quick question, Mr. Barwin. The capital outlay, you've said once it moves, the money moves into that, it doesn't come out unless, we're in a pinch or whatever. How can it be put in at any time? Can it be put in when you see, like this year, we went $500,000 above and we go, hey, let's put that money in because we did stay above board on the budget, and maybe you budget a minimal amount and fluctuate it based on whether you hit a balanced budget or not. I don't know.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's allowed, and many districts do that. So that 590,000 that we were to the good from 23 to 24 could be transferred into that
Okay.
capital reserve. Yep.
So it sounds like the thinking is, though, and sorry to prolong the budget thing, but if you make that commitment to do it on a regular basis, it's more predictable. And rather than, oh, we had a little extra money, we'll throw this in. I know in sort of personal finance, that's the recommendation, is just got to always save a certain amount consistently rather than when you find a $5 bill on the sidewalk, throw it into your savings account.
Correct.
Okay.
So, moving forward, administratively, we're looking to get the smallest possible deficit for the next year, and that means option 3, is what we have to chew on, and if there's support for that, or the board needs to say, we're not comfortable doing that, and we have to either cut some of the request or do a smaller tax increase or no tax increase and live with pulling that amount of money out of fund balance, which isn't sustainable.
What's in fund balance? What's in fund balance now? 12 million?
17.2 million
Jeez.
as of June 30th, 2024.
Keep going up instead of down. Okay.
So there is some expenses that are come out of here. Like the bird roof is projected to come out of here, which is about 1.4 million. And then some other ancillary capital outlay maintenance.
And
Water heater.
there is the Hunger Game grant that the state has for facilities that we have to apply for that we didn't get last year. I think $100 and some million for all 500 school districts. So we applied last year, did not get it. We're hopeful that we're looking to find a way to apply again. So that might be some additional monies there, but can't count on it.
That's for facilities?
That's for the things like the bird roof, which we may be able to defray some of the costs from.
Fred, the unassigned fund balance is the 2.3.
Okay, I understand that, but what?
Everything else is assigned to a line item. So like that 2.3 is like the free money. Like you have some play with that of where that goes. Everything else is assigned.
Okay, would it be possible to put asterisks by the ones that are assigned and ones that are not?
It's that third one.
So it's the third one
It says
over.
assigned,
It has a
all
lot
of
of the numbers underneath it.
Oh, it's everything.
You can only, so the state only allows you to put 8% of your total budget. So of that 71.5 million, you're only allowed to put 8% in unassigned,
Okay, I didn't see that.
which is 5.7 million, but I mean,
Thank you. I didn't see that part. I didn't look up there. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll just say I'm comfortable with scenario number 3. I guess in maybe some future, we've talked a little bit about some of these new positions, but I don't know. I think it'd be worth revisiting the conversation of why the latter two, the music and the PE. There was a lot of discussion about music at the beginning of the year, and then we had a plan put in place for this year, and I don't know enough to know if that plan worked or if that plan didn't work. And if it didn't work, and this new music teacher position is important to like make it work, then great. But if it did work, then I don't know, maybe that's something to revisit. I don't want to have that conversation right now, but I feel like we can have that conversation next month maybe.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
And the same to the PE. I mean, or sorry, the swimming. I mean, I remember that conversation, but I think we could all probably use a reminder of why that might be a priority.
All righty.
Burnout.
All right, so we're just gonna roll right into committee of the whole unless anyone needs a break. Anyone need a break? Good, okay.
So two discussion items. Mr. Bybee is here. I'd like to invite him to come on up. There were questions about the RFP for transportation out of the Transportation Committee. Remember, this is a binary decision. It's actually trinary now. That the options before the board are: we wish to send the RFP out. We just want to do negotiations with our current contractors, or I think, in talking with Mr. Bybee and from other information based on the timeline of where we are, do we want to do a 1-year extension with our current contractors and then send out an RFP, in September, or when that agreement, the next September after that agreement would roll out. So, Mr. Bybee, you want to kind of take us away?
We have went over our RFP process for a little while at majority of our committee meetings, and discussion with Mr. Long, Mr. August, a good bit on the board here, as far as what our options would be when it comes to renegotiation or the request for proposal.
Mr. Bybee, can you move a little bit closer to the mic, please?
Yes, sir. Request for proposal is really to open up a competitive avenue. Considering we have 3 different contractors, this allows us the ability to see what's out and available within the area as far as service companies or transportation companies to give us the best value for what we need, especially with growing. And honestly, I'm just kind of here to answer any questions as far as.
I'm the one to ask for you, so I guess I'll start off the question. All right, are you number one, are you making this move because of financial problems?
No.
Okay. Number 2, have you had any discussion with Boyo about this prior to sending out this RFP?
I've had discussions with all 3 of the contractors to let them know that this could be an option, but that's to the furthest.
All right, I know that, but Boyo is the one we have now. Have you presented him anything in writing or saying he's not upholding his end of the contract?
So Fred, just to interrupt, this is not about like a lack of service or someone not living up to a contract. This is the contract ending and us deciding whether to get, just like we would get 3 bids for, to do some kind of work, like that's what this is. So the contract's over. It's not about service or frustrations or anything. But it is if the district desires to get multiple quotes for transportation, this is the time we would do it. Okay, so it's based on the contract ending. So we're going to be without a contract, without busing, at the end of this school year. So we have to do something to secure busing for next year. It's just one of these 3 avenues is what the board.
And I understand when the contract, but no, you know me, I believe in local businesses. I fully support local businesses. I just find it hard that we're going to start a contract with other people just because the contract ended. There has to be a reason. None of us would be in business and expect to be thrown out without a reason why I'm being kicked out the door.
But Boyle could submit one of the bids. We're not saying we're getting rid of Boyle.
Yes, well, in essence, I'm saying they are a community. I think they should get preference. We present something to Boyle, and Boyle say, I can't do it. I got no problem. Send it out the streets and anywhere to Mars if you want. But that's a local people, local business. This is the third time local business has been jeopardized. Chamberlain Winger had a sewer, had a, potty things. They were on a chopping block. Had to fight to get them staying. Chamberlain Pest Control was on a chopping block. Had to fight to get them here. Now these. I'm just having a problem with 3 local businesses on the chopping block.
I don't believe that this is a personal decision. This was actually recommended back when I believe Mike Montadoro was still here, and it was recommended that it go out for an RFP. Transportation has not been put out for an RFP for more than 2 decades.
Okay, and I was on it. I've been on the transportation board for 4 to 5 years.
You're right. So you would remember
Oh, yeah.
when we met on April 18th, 2023, when it was on the agenda, when Randy brought it to us, like knowing we still had a lot of time to plan, but we had met with Christie. We discussed the RFP.
Boyle was there too.
This was after we reopened their contract for the
Yes.
second time at their request. And it was after that we had met as a committee to discuss their contract, which we had opened up. And then October 26th, we had met and we had actually agreed between October and December to proceed with the RFP and also the WEX fuel program, which we've also seen a substantial savings from. So the committee back in 2023, and I believe, Jimmy, you were on that committee. Levi and myself were on that committee when we had agreed to open it up just as a potential savings. It had nothing to do with saving money
But also,
or even about local individuals, because the Boyanowskis, I mean, while they support community business, they've been great community partners, but he doesn't live local. A lot of their drivers are, but some of those drivers also came from Lee Macbeth.
where are these people coming? You got the 3 what's the other businesses you deal with?
Heckmeyer and Freeze.
Where are they at?
Franklin County.
Frank. Okay, they're not local. I mean,
Franklin County is local.
hey,
so
Shippensburg.
There aren't a ton of
actually
bus
is no-
companies to begin with.
That's what I understand. So if these 3 companies can't, let's say,
We have board members that live in Franklin County.
the county is not the issue. There's companies, if Pittsburgh come in, had a bid, and it's lower than any of these 3 because they're bigger and badder, that'd be okay?
But Fred, we could still take a Boyle bid.
That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why we can't. If we talk to them first and then take the bid, and they can't meet what you're looking for, I got no problem.
So here's the
but
thing.
we don't have
the
anything
board
to compare
also
to.
agreed
You
2
do.
board meetings ago on a fiscal efficiency committee to look at, can we do something cheaper? How am I going to know let's just say I just had my house remodeled. True story. How am I supposed to know if you're the cheapest bid because you've been my contractor for 20 years, if I'm going to go out and get an estimate for something else just to see? If we are using taxpayer money, it is fiscally responsible to see, these are my requirements. You tell me how much you're willing to pay for the X amount of requirements.
Okay.
So, similar to the
It's-
building. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's not a matter of trying to part ways or based on quality customer service. It's a matter of we look at our budget, we see deficits, and we know transportation is constantly increasing. Can we get it cheaper? When it was recommended that we did, especially when we had received a citation, when we were receiving federal money for transportation, and we did not put it out to bid. So to me, it's also...
So there's something on record that we've been fined for not putting out the bid.
Yes, sir. It was my very first executive session on the school board. Mr. Kressler can attest to that. Yes, sir, we did. And that was when we were receiving federal monies.
I mean, I know there was an issue. Part of that issue was probably a little self-inflicted because at one time a board decided to make 2 positions 1. That may have tied into it. There's a lot, but there is that is there. I think the local thing, Ms. Eberly alluded to that. it's also in a contract, at least it was in the contract for the first time we put it out to bid again, because Boyo was never in Shippensburg until they got this contract, that the provider will provide like a terminal within the district bounds. Am I correct?
You can make that a stipulation, yeah.
We can pretty much make anything in that RFP we
Make
want.
anybody local.
Yeah, so we can say that, you know, there could be a group from Pittsburgh that says they want to come, and we say, hey, you need to get the terminal within the Shippensburg School District school boundaries, and that's a part of it. And if they're not interested in that, well, if you're an outside bus company, I don't know where you're going to store your buses if you're coming from far away. And then we've also, I talked about it at the last meeting, and it just came up again, the local drivers from Lee Macbeth and Sons, who are the local employees and the community members, were retained by Boyo, had they chose to be retained. I don't believe there's anybody who was, I mean, if someone chose to like, hey, I don't want to work now, or I want to change professions, that's part of it, but those folks were all offered to stay on, and many of them did. As we've seen, we've had some bus drivers come here and present to the board, bus drivers that have worked for the district through a contractor for 20 plus years driving buses. So the local thing, like I don't, you know, we put that in the RFP and say that we want these people to be the first preference for jobs if it goes to if it goes out and it's awarded to a company that would not be the current provider.
I know, that's no on the time I was on the board. We went to Boyo. I don't remember if you were there. I don't think Jim was. We went to Boyo. He came to us, and we said we would like a discount. He was the first. He put the money into the cameras on his buses. We didn't have to pay a dime. He put the money in. There's other things. He gave us discounts on different things over the years.
So I don't think that's 100% correct.
He paid
because
out of
when we were here actually talking about when those individuals came to speak on the cameras and even the walkie-talkies, Mr. Bybee, can you speak to that on who owns what technology?
So Boyo, the contractors own their technology. Boyo, from my understanding, when the contract was done before I got here, we actually supplied part of the funding. We purchased the cameras and radio equipment and everything.
I don't think so. I think he foot the bill for that.
We had this discussion in that meeting, and that was one of the big issues that when we were working with Heckmeyer of who was going to provide some of those, knowing that we actually own that through grants.
We didn't give them no money. Like Myers did we?
No, we didn't, because that was part of our agreement with them, because we didn't want to absorb that.
But I
So
don't,
just in the contract that we had with Boyo, we gave $45,000 one-time payment by district for camera upgrades and $15,000 for radio upgrades.
okay. When was that?
2021, 2020?
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Lemon.
So I know there are people on the board here who often in their professional lives take bids and are probably respond to RFPs. I'm assuming that that's not seen as like a slap in the face. That's just sort of normal business practice that you know that you're in competition with a few other bidders to get the opportunity to provide a service. And that doesn't mean, if you were the person providing the service before, that doesn't mean you did a bad job, but that's just sort of how we do things. Is that?
Not in every case.
So I just point out to the board, just remember we've been on a hot streak with bids. The stadium was bid 5.6 total, came in under 4. Our current project for that was that's going on at the high school and middle school was north of 10, came in under 7. So the bid process has been good to us. I think that the real question here, Mr. Bybee, is has the train left from a timing standpoint to do an RFP? Can we get an RFP done in the window of time that we have left until this contract ends, and to make sure that we have transportation for next year?
Given the circumstance with the timing, we would not have enough timing to be able to do the RFP adequately to make sure we're getting the bids. Because we're behind the curve a little bit, a lot of the companies that we could have seen in the bid process wouldn't be available because we've already have maybe assigned to another district. So in best case scenario, we would look to extend or renegotiate this contract for a year and then open the bid starting in October, most likely, to give enough time.
Oh, what other company? Heckmeyer's is one, and Deutsch, is that another? What
As far as who would bid,
Yeah.
I
mean, who do we use now? Heckmeyer's and
we use
Boyle?
Heckmeyer, Freeze, and Boyo.
All right, Freeze. So they're the local ones that I know of. So they're most apt to, well, I don't know if they're going to, because some of them are having trouble with their own, from my information. Some of those two, I think Heckmeyer's is having trouble with his own supply for the Chambersburg School District.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I believe so. But anyway, y'all do what you want, but for me,
So just to be clear that everyone heard what Mr. Bobby just said.
So you're saying, yeah, you're saying we can't, I mean, the point is not,
The point is,
it's moot at this point, is what you're saying, is that we can't,
Right, because of
there's not a time to do an RFP?
we, as far as the yes or no on the RFP, I think is still, a pertinent decision to see if this is something we want to pursue next year and what our time would be. But considering the time we have available to us now, we'd have a very tight window to be able to find or put out the process, because I think it's 30 days in the media, and then after the 30 days, we bring it back. The board or the committee would have bid reading and then evaluation, and then an award of the contract another 20 days or so after that.
In the past, how long have the contracts with Boyo been?
This one's 5 years. I believe that was standard, but you're seeing a lot of districts that are getting away from the 5 year and moving closer to a 3 year term.
And in that 5 year, we've opened it up twice.
I think maybe give some clarification as to the results of us opening it up, like what that meant.
That we ended up paying more.
Yes.
So I guess one of my biggest questions now, based on your response, is like, how did we get here? Because on December 14th, 2023, the Transportation Committee agreed based on the agenda item of opening this up. We reported back to the board as a whole stating that we were going in agreement to put this out for RFP. And then 2 years later, now we don't have enough time. Like, how did we get here of planning ahead a year and a half, 2 years, to now we don't have enough time?
I don't have a good answer for you. We did, part of my, at least my process and what I did throughout the RFP was reviewing what other districts did when they presented RFP, reached out to different counterparts, different districts to see pertinent information, specific things that they outlined that their district required compared to ours, and melded that together to give us our current RFP. But in that process, as far as decision-wise, I don't know why it took us as long as it actually did.
So going back to your previous answer to the question of the timing of the RFP, like, I mean, we talked about the hypothetical of the company from Pittsburgh coming and, making a terminal in Shippensburg or whatever. I get that in that scenario, like, a company would need a lot of time to decide if they were going to, make that sort of investment. But we already have a bunch of, regional bus providers that, are familiar with the district and that we use, right? We've got two others besides Boyo. I mean, help me out if I'm wrong, but it seems reasonable that it would not take them the same amount of lead time to be able to, get up and running with,
Well,
providing
considering the
transportation
cost
to our district.
a lot of the cost of buses in our vans, our average cost of buses, you're upwards of $100,000. So for other companies to bid or promote, what they would want to do here in the district, whether it be take over completely or share the amount of routes that we actually have, they wouldn't know that. They would only present what they could do, and then it would be on the board and the committee to actually make that decision if that's what we wanted to move forward with. So it could take some time. The window that we have, really what I'm saying about, in my opinion, that it would be better to, extend or negotiate for the year is because of how tight the window is. And that's my worry, is that we rush into a contract that maybe doesn't outline specifically what we want or even give us the cost benefit that we would like to see.
So from my perspective, the RFP is a no-brainer. I mean, it's fiscally responsible. It's sort of civically responsible. But if we're beyond the point in the calendar where it makes sense to do it, then we're in a tight spot. I mean, I would root for Boyo to win the contract, and I think a high probability that they would, given that they, sort of already provide service to the district. But it would also give them a chance to sharpen their pencil a little bit and see if they can't, do something to be a little bit more competitive. But given that window is closed, or that ship has sailed, I guess, I mean, I would be supportive of negotiating, a 1-year extension to the contract, but unfortunately that also sort of signals to them that, like, hey, like, we're going to be doing this in the future, and I don't know, maybe they don't want to agree to that. It puts us in a bit of a bind. But certainly, I would think that the company, Boyo, would have to understand that it's responsible for the district to put these kinds of contracts out to bid, that's just good sort of civic responsibility. But I guess at this point, I would certainly be in favor of trying to negotiate an extension to the contract, and then, get that RFP out early in the fall, and, root for Boyo to win the contract. And I see no reason why they wouldn't be able to.
And ultimately, the decision too on the transportation services we get is, and I feel for you, is your decision to make. So whenever we receive these contracts or these values and everything, I'm there as a conduit to provide the information, but not necessarily making the decision. So with an RFP, yes, it does give us more options, and I think when we look at it from the perspective of being competitive and seeing what value we can get, that is smart. But there's nothing that says we don't get 6 bids and we don't like any of them except for the one Boyo or Heckmeyer or Freeze or one of our local companies puts in.
When does the Boyo contract expire?
July 31st. And that actually is everybody. Or no, sorry, June 30th.
Do we know what other school districts our size are paying for transportation?
I'm sorry?
And do we know what other districts in our area similar to us are paying for transportation?
Actually, Caleb, do you still have that?
Yeah. I have a spreadsheet that I pulled off of PDE for transportation costs that I can send out, that other districts in Cumberland and Franklin County are paying. It's relative. I mean, it's hard because each contract is very unique. I can't talk too much about this because I'm not it's not my expertise, but it's very unique per district.
Some pay based on formulas. Some is, your bus has to be 10 years or younger, or if it's 10 years and older. Some use state formula. Some use a hybrid.
Daily rate.
And it's just difficult to pull it up because you have some, richer districts who might use, a different formula because it makes sense for them versus.
Size of the district and enrollment also plays a big.
Some districts so not to interrupt, there's some districts that are using like all natural gas buses. That's a part of their requirement when they go out to bid, where like we are obviously not doing that in Shippensburg. That's never come up as a conversation, but like that's been a thing for larger districts.
And some things too is our location. I've referred to it as we're in kind of a dead zone. Like some of our out of district placements in areas that we need to go to, we're not as close as obviously some of these other districts. So when it comes to transportation costs or how our vans are transporting back and forth, it's a good distance, and we could see a difference in cost there because other districts could circulate the same vehicle, whereas we're having to use a totally separate vehicle to provide a run.
I have one more question. In the contract or this RFP you're sending out, there's a section here with lines under it on page 5, section 4. I'll just get to the middle of it. Upon the release of the RFP during the conclusion of the selection process, there should be no communication between any prospective respondent. And then it goes down to with any staff of school district or any elected representative or other appointed official of the district and staff except as provided in the RFP. So they can't talk to us.
So you said it was page 5?
Page 5, section 4. So they have it underlined.
Sorry. Yeah, so a lot of districts will include a clause like that to make sure that there's an unbiased decision making as far as when they're looking at all the bids that come in. So instead of having the communication travel through the board, the communication travels to the transportation department or Mr. August. We answer the questions that are required as far as specific route designation, how long a route could be, how many students they could be, questions like that. And we don't want to, when they're submitting for a bid, we want to make sure that it's even keel as possible and not giving incorrect information. So that there is to try and mitigate not false information, but maybe incorrect or potentially incorrect that doesn't give them the best opportunity to be selected.
So after the selection's over, that doesn't apply any longer? About the no talking?
That one I would have to clarify a little bit
Because
because after your selection, like once a bid reading happens, you would have the award and then you would have the negotiation. And I'm not sure as far as
that's not part of the contract. I'm just wondering. I just have about not being able to talk to
this is only bid process. It outlines the contract, but it doesn't specify the kind of meat and potatoes of what the district would require.
Okay, I just want clarification. Thank you.
So question on item 5E on the agenda, because it's for action to approve the RFP. Is that changing then based on what you just said regarding waiting a year?
So I had the same question. I mean, it sounds like
you stated that like your administrative recommendation would be to postpone it for a year, but it's literally up for vote tonight to draft and to advertise for the contracted pupil transportation.
So with my opinion, that I still believe the vote is valid, but the year would adjust. So yes, we would see next year, but then we would still want to make a determination whether or not we want to proceed with it moving forward into next year.
So in other words, in your mind, the vote is kind of what Dr. Goetz was saying, that we're essentially saying it's the will of the board to proceed with an RFP, but the timing you're proposing would be that RFP process takes place in the next academic year and not during this academic year. So if we were to vote yes on
For
this,
the 25-26 school year.
so yeah, so the agenda item might need to be,
Wait, advertise. No, I don't know, because it does say that the current vendor, their contract expires the end of the 24-25 school year.
I do believe it would need to be amended to be for clarity at least.
so
And we would still, I mean, the question of whether to extend it or try to extend it for a year, that's open, right? I mean, that has to be a board decision.
So like, I mean, maybe
Now
we
it
don't
turns into
do this in the
questions.
committee of the whole, like,
Sorry.
but the proposed, the motion would be to extend the contract for a year with the intention of going up for RFP in the next academic year. Just to make it a little clearer than what's in the agenda.
Why don't we just remove that, change it, and then do negotiations with Boyo for a 1-year extension?
Yeah, I was
and
gonna say,
revisit
we
it.
at least need the first part, right? Because we got to empower somebody to engage in those negotiations for a year, because that's not presently, nobody's been empowered to do
But
that.
I feel like now by us stating like, you're also giving your vendor the upper hand by stating that, like, we're going to stick with you for another year. What's your price? When back in 2023, we already voted or agreed as a transportation committee to do this. So it really shouldn't even be a question.
I think that horse is out of the barn, though.
I mean,
Yeah, I believe.
what would you propose then? I mean,
I would propose that we put the RFP out now, or as soon as Mr. Bybee can get it together, and we know their contract expires the end of June. So it would be for, like, my initiation that it would be for the following school year, for the 25-26.
Well, I mean, I hear you, but I'm also hearing, I'm also hearing Mr. Bybee say that that's not enough time for transportation providers to actually put together a proposal. I mean, I have no idea. I have no, I have no knowledge of this industry, so I don't know what is a reasonable amount of time or not. But I'm trusting that Mr. Bybee
My
has
biggest
some
worry
insight
and
here.
biggest concern with this is that given the amount of time, and from my understanding, even with our RFP process and then the negotiations, I believe that'd be handled at the committee, right? Negotiations committee. So even if we would award, you're still looking at the negotiations that would have to happen between who we awarded the contract and then to the, like, implementation of them taking over or Boyo staying or what was ever selected.
I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a board decision. I think a bigger question that I have is how do we prevent this from happening? To be forward thinking and to plan ahead, to meet a year and a half in advance, to approve something and to still be late. Like, we weren't even late for being early. Like, we completely missed the mark. Like, I guess, how do we fix this as an organization moving forward? Because people showed up to a meeting. It was important to you. You had it on the agenda. Board members showed up. We met several times, and a recommendation was brought forward. Like, there's a break in the process that we have got to fix, because I mean, as a district, you know, I just believe that we're going to give a vendor an upper hand, because now it looks like did drop the ball and
Let me.
negotiations.
How do you feel you give him up a hand?
When did
Going bid.
when did the transportation committee make that recommendation?
December 13th, 2023.
So why was it not on the agenda then?
Because I don't, like, when we bring recommendations forward, we don't always put it on the agenda for a vote. Like, that's when the WEX one was, but I don't know if, again, this is dropping the ball. So, like, the WEX program ended up on the agenda for a vote. We reported that was what we had talked about, but this is that break in communication that I'm talking about. It didn't show up for a vote, maybe because we were so premature in the discussion.
But it wouldn't have mattered if we'd have brought it right to the agenda then. It would have been approved, and he could have had everything printed out and done and out for bid for whatever year it was.
So,
I mean, I think that's our fault as a board for not voting on it after it was recommended. That's just my opinion.
so in the interest of time and trying to move things in a forward-looking direction, to your point, Ms. Everett, I think a solution is that we as a board very clearly change the agenda or change the motion, make a motion like we've said, that says in October, whenever you feel it's timely, you need to you need to start on an RFP because we are interested in the RFP process. That sends a very clear message that that's what we want to do. And then coupled with that would obviously have to be the year extension. And then you're getting some much clearer direction from the board.
Why don't we just set it up that beginning of the year prior, all RFPs or all contracts for the following year are presented. If we'd have done this in August, this should have been done. We'd have had this over with and argued out, and it wouldn't affect the timing. But is there a problem with doing it the first of the school year, the year prior?
Typically, we'd want to get started sometime in September, Fred.
August, September, and that's before the next school year.
Correct.
Yes, that's understandable. So we can't leave a man standing there. I asked my questions. So.
Well, I think it's up to us what to do. I mean, in the next meeting, think we intend to make a motion to go a particular direction, and I guess we can continue the discussion then.
Yeah.
But we can't resolve what we're going to do in committee meeting.
Any other questions for Mr. Bobby?
No. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the other item on the committee of the whole was to discuss the committee structure. I'm suggesting we don't have enough time to do that. So we can either bring it up during the agenda item, or we can table that item and circle back to it. Just as an FYI.
I mean, we have a policy committee report in the
Right.
next meeting. I think we at least start it there, and if
Right.
it's going to take longer, we postpone it.
Okay. I think just reporting out, maybe taking questions makes sense.
Yeah, would like to try to push that committee through.
Sure.
All right, we have 4 minutes, so.
Put in swimming pools already.
What?
Put in swimming pools already.
Not opening them, just answering, selling them right now. Not opening or doing any of that kind of work.
That's paperwork.
Well, as soon as that warm weather hits, that's what happens.
It's warm now. Not warm enough, but it's warm.
Yep, nobody's in a hurry, and all of a sudden it's warm.
Yeah.
I'm still confused. I have no idea how we're late for going to bed. Whose responsibility is it to watch for that? I mean, I don't know when I don't know when the
I
contracts
left
go
that.
out.
I was on that committee until December of '23, and 24 I wasn't on there, so I don't know.
Just in case someone didn't bring it up for. I feel more comfortable if it's
Mrs. Everly. Go to whack.
What are you doing now? You ain't coaching basketball. You got all kinds of free
Mom,
time.
like waiting, like shut up, say it. Are we ready? Are you ready? Hello and welcome back to the Shippensburg Area School District Planning and Action Meeting. Calling this meeting to order. Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Here.
Mr. Mike Carey,
Here.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Here.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
He's here. Mr.
Mr. Kirk Noggle,
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Here.
Mr. Darren Donovan,
Here.
Mrs. Steph Eberly,
Here.
and Mr. Blount.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we begin our deliberations this evening, let us once again be reminded of our duty to represent all of the children of this school community, regardless of age, sex, race, or creed, and regardless of need or ability. This meeting is being live streamed and uploaded to the district's YouTube channel. May we now have a moment of silence to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and actions on behalf of the students in the Shippensburg Area School District. May we also have a moment of silence for Anna Weiser, 1949 graduate of Shippensburg Area Senior High School, Carolyn Heil, 1946 graduate, and Ernest Reeder, 1964 graduate of Shippensburg High School. Mr. August, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, ma'am.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Red Scott make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Seeing as there are no citizens' comments regarding agenda items, we will move on to the reports. Student representatives, Mr. Blount.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off with the high school sports and middle school sports are now in full swing. Baseball had their first scrimmage of the season today at Carlisle. Softball had 2 scrimmages this past weekend against Boonesboro and Middletown. And track has their first meet of the season Tuesday, March 18th at Boiling Springs. In other news, the end of the third marking period is fast approaching. I think most people are now in the groove of 5-day weeks, which is good. The musical Hadestown was held here at Sashes March 6th, 7th, and 8th. It was very well done, and the effort put in could be seen. I also believe our drama department was also one of the first high schools to put on this musical in America, so that is pretty incredible. Also, the middle school is putting on their musical of Alice in Wonderland this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Please stop by and check it out if you can. And Art Rages is being held here at Sashes on Thursday, so please come check out students' artworks from all ages in our school district. If you're looking for any artwork with my name on it, I'm sorry to disappoint you, not gonna find any, but that's all for me.
All right. Dr. Lyman, the Career Tech Report.
There's a lot happening at the Career Tech, but I don't know that we need to talk about all of it in this meeting. I'll just be brief and say that there is a personnel issue that is taking some energy for both us on the board and especially Ms. Everly and the administration there. So that's probably all we need to say about that issue. They presented their audit report at our last meeting. They are also, much like we did in the past, working on a feasibility study to help plan their future. And they will have if any of you are business owners in the Franklin County area, they will be looking to send out a survey to get input from local businesses about what needs are and what potential future programs or training might need to be done to meet the needs of local employers. I think that's it.
Good, thank you. Policy committee.
Yes, that would be me. I don't know when we're discussing any of this. I can tell you that we went through we were asked to go address the policy to try to match with what the board was looking for on creating maybe possibly different board committees and restructuring a little bit. After our deliberation, we kept these standing committees, and they are as facilities, which still would meet twice monthly. On Thursdays, the budget and finance meet monthly as we do currently. The Franklin County tech schedule would stay as is. The board committees that we currently use and some that we looked to add was negotiations, policy, transportation, athletics, outreach, safety. It was requested the Fiscal Efficiency Committee, and the Policy Committee recommended curriculum and student engagement, which would have the ability to review obviously any curriculum if needed, and also to consider mental health needs under that group. The programming and planning was also addressed as to be able to look in a 5-year plus plan and figure out what do we need to do. I mean, if we ever look at land, what comes next? Does a purchase of that come? How's that free up other buildings? Or at least we're looking down the road and trying to figure out what's the best avenue moving forward. We did modify the policy. Thank you very much to Mrs. DeLong and her work on it to match what we have, which really didn't take too much tweaking. We kind of got rid of the ad hoc part of it and left the board committee title stay in that section. And that would allow for all those committees. We still use the groups. We still have the policy teams that were selected by the chair. And any time that a policy would be needed, or transportation, if they have to meet to discuss an issue, or athletics, if they have to meet to discuss any issues with the sports, all they have to do is set and call a meeting. So, I mean, it really doesn't change. It just saves you from having to meet if there's nothing going on. So either the chair can call a meeting as needed per work that needs done, or the chair of the board committee can say, hey, we need to meet to discuss a new policy creation or whatever it is. We tried to keep it free as possible in that regard. I don't know, do you or Mrs. DeLong have anything? Michael, anything else to add? That was it.
I mean, so you all have the document we came up with, and it was in the agenda. Hopefully you've read it. The basic thinking was that the committees would be committees of the whole, unless given a specific task, it would be limited in scope and time. But for the most part, committees would be, that list of 9 committees would potentially be committee of the whole. The exceptions currently would be policy, because we have a set of policies we need to kind of get through, and that's super boring for these kinds of meetings, and fairly detail-oriented and involves a lot of wordsmithing. And so that's kind of the thinking. The last part on that document was just some thoughts about changing the general structure of board meetings, and we didn't feel like the little policy committee should be the ones making those decisions, but recommended potentially a retreat to sort of reevaluate how we run our meetings. To see if we want to look at how other districts are doing it and see if maybe we want to change, maybe we don't.
One question, or I can save it for the end.
You say, are we discussing actually now, or are we doing that during the
We'll wait.
discussion part? So,
I can wait.
okay.
Is that it for the policy update? Do you have any more?
Yeah, we had two we were yet to do on actual policies, but we used pretty much our whole time just to try to iron this part out. We'll reschedule and meet again and finish the last couple policies if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Facilities.
I'll refer to Mr. Noggle, who took detailed notes.
Heck, I didn't get enough of notes. It was too big of a meeting. Supervisor Scott Mack from Southampton, Cumberland, came in and discussed the bypass from, it's just one leg of a bypass that is intended to get from exit 24 to 29. This little section would be from Airport Road to the back of SACES, our intermediate school. Scott, Supervisor Mack has been here before and talked to us a little bit about getting some help from the school so that they can gain access across the piece of land that the district owns. That would be the entranceway to a bridge across the railroad tracks beside the intermediate school. There's a lot of conversation that needs to be had with that. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of public questions on that, especially from the Holler Heights area, because it would grant the intermediate school potential emergency exits and entrances, helping us in that respect. But there's a lot of questions that need to come out of that. So there's going to be a lot more conversation from us, and I would hope to hear from the public on what they would like to see. We did change our agenda around a little bit so that sometimes the facilities gets into a lot of items. So we've talked to Mr. Linton about maintaining a list of items that we brought up, such as solar panels that Mr. Donovan had brought up a long time ago, so that we want to move forward with that. We did discuss that, and there was the will to look into that a little bit more. So Mr. Linton is also doing that. Errol from the maintenance department and Mr. Linton also brought information about they would like to purchase a bucket truck to be able to do some elevated work around the schools. There's an electric company that had one that has been maintained by Boyo for multiple years. Daryl went out and looked at it, and I actually stopped out and looked at it. It's not too bad. It's a pretty decent piece of equipment. They asked for approval or recommendation from us, and we did give them the recommendation for $8,000 to buy this electric truck or bucket truck for the maintenance department.
That's on the agenda for tonight, I think.
Is it on the agenda tonight? Okay. We also gave a quick update on the 18th. It was going to be the 18th or the 20th, but it looks like the 18th is going to be a meeting with the borough to potentially further the parking issues that we're working with on the stadium project. Invitation was by Kevin Plaster. So we will get that set up, and you'll have more information to come in the future. Also brought information
I'm
about.
sorry to interrupt. Do you know what time that meeting is?
I do not yet, Bill. The Nancy Grayson sprinkler system needs replaced, and Daryl had brought in I think it was three bids. Can't remember what the names of the companies are. We discussed that because the system's old and outdated. Wasn't something that we had in our budget. So they're gonna have to do an upgrade on that. So we did discuss that, but I don't know that we actually recommended to purchase until we figured out where the budget was gonna come from. We did talk about, along with this efficiency committee, which kind of plays into looking forward to a 5 to 10 year plan, which before I got here, I kind of heard you guys talking about it in Caleb's updates. What Caleb was talking about and budget finance seemed to fit pretty well with the efficiency committee. We ended up talking about some change orders. We were constantly catching change orders. We have a $31,000 or $32,000 change order. We have an 8,000 water vault change order that's coming up. We recommend that they be paid. And part of the reason that we were trying to catch up with these items and do a little bit of oversight is to keep from paying overages and change orders. But we came to the understanding after Mr. Linton had done some research on the prints. Our prints were sent out prior to a complete set of prints. So the bids came back in and they weren't on approved prints. So these changes, we can't really argue with much. So it's our opinion, this is my opinion, that we should not do that anymore. We get an approved set of prints, then we send them out for bid. We get a solid bid back, and then we can hold everybody accountable. That's about it. And you think of anything else?
Yeah, I just want to talk about the first issue for a minute.
The what?
The first issue, the road.
Oh, yes, please do.
So Scott Mack came to this board some time ago. I mean, feels like it's over a year ago now with a proposal. And he brought maps to the facilities meeting, which actually helped me understand the whole project a little bit better. But and I'm going to try to explain this without the use of a map, which might be difficult. But anyway, there's a proposed road that would go from Airport Road, like sort of adjacent to that 55 plus neighborhood that backs up against the intermediate school property, through a field, and then would like sort of make a turn and cross the railroad tracks right at that corner of the intermediate school, where there's kind of a berm that goes up to the wooded area that is next to the railroad tracks. Then it would cross the railroad tracks, and then from there make its way to Queen Street, presumably on that road that's next to Giant. The thing is, this is two different townships involved here, right? So the school property is in Shippensburg Township, and the railroad tracks where the proposed bridge would be is in Shippensburg Township. All the Giant stuff is in Shippensburg Township. This is Southampton Township. Scott Mack is a Southampton Township supervisor coming and saying that their portion of the road, they have grant monies from PennDOT or somebody to complete their portion of the road. Now, they don't need anything, my understanding, they don't need anything from us to complete their portion of the road. They can build all the way up to, as long as they acquire the property from the property owner, they can build their part of the road all the way up to the boundaries of the school district. Presumably at some future time, if this project all comes together, Shippensburg Township would come to the district and ask that we give that little corner piece of land to them so that road could be built and the bridge over the railroad tracks continued. The reason why Scott Mack came to the meeting is that he wants, Southampton Township wants to build an access road from the end of their proposed road down to the intermediate school parking lot. So I mean, there's a number of ways that this could look, right? It could be like a straight, like, thoroughfare, right? Like, and which would send traffic from Airport Road through Holler Heights down to Orange. I don't think that makes sense to anybody, and certainly everybody, all of my neighbors would go crazy if I suggested any support for that. However, an alternative proposal is like you have a gate there, right? Either a paved or a sort of gravel extension from the end of the field where the road would end into the school property. So the advantage here, I mean, there's two possible advantages. One is just emergency vehicle access through that way if needed, and then the other potentially is that you could potentially route buses that direction during drop off and pickup, and then close the gate for the other times if that made sense. So that's sort of their proposal, but it would require, like, you know, leveling out a portion of that berm and then, you know, sort of making some kind of access road, you know, either paved or dirt or gravel or whatever to the school. That's the question that we have to decide. My understanding, based on his conversation, is like Southampton Township is willing to pay for all of that. We would just need to give them the land or the permission or whatever to do it. But I'm not sure that there's a strong incentive for the district to do it. I mean, that's for all of us to decide. And if it's a question that we want to decide, I would suggest that we invite Mr. Mack to this meeting to, you know, provide that proposal to the whole board. But just to be clear, they can build their whole portion of the road without any, they don't need us to do anything for them to build their portion of the road. Where we would be more involved is if Shippensburg Township wanted to pick up the ball where it was left off and build the bridge and the rest of the extension. That's all. Thank you for allowing me that lengthy moment of explanation.
Thank you. Dr. Danette.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. August had asked me to present to you an overview of where all in the curriculum we talk about online safety for students. I think Mrs. DeLong's trying to get the display up. Go ahead to the next slide, Leslie. So we currently offer lessons on online safety K through 3 when they're in library time, and in grades 4 and 5 there's counseling lessons, and then there's also lessons embedded in the technology special, and then in grades 6 through 8 in the STEAM course. Next slide. So in kindergarten, of course, we're trying to talk in age-appropriate conversations. So the kindergarten topics are: how do you go places safely online? How do you balance online and offline activities? And how can we be active listeners when using devices? The next grade level, first grade, is then talking about how do you stay safe when you're visiting a website or an app, and how can we be safe and responsible and respectful online. And then in second grade, we go on to talking about what information is okay to have in your digital footprint, and how can we be good digital citizens. And in third grade, we continue with the progression of what should you do when someone uses mean or hurtful language on the internet, and how do digital citizens take responsibility for themselves and for their community. And then in fourth grade, again, as the students are maturing, the topics get a little heavier. Private and personal information with role-playing of what to do during different scenarios, finding media balance, understanding your digital footprint, and online safety in regards to content. What type of information or what type of sites is it safe to go to? And then in fifth grade, They talk about phishing. Again, we're emphasizing private information and how to secure information. Fifth grade is when we introduce cyberbullying and the counterpart of being kind. And then we also introduce the online safety in regards to cyberbullying with counselors. So the counselors are offering it, and also the technology course is offering it. So they're getting it twice during their fifth grade year. In sixth grade, we talk about how to use the internet safely and what are the responsibilities of a digital citizen and password protection. And then in seventh grade, they focus on protecting students from phishing and from sharing online information. And then in high school, we have an internet safety elective course, and that's an online course. There's additional opportunities. For example, we've been doing professional development for staff through the unconference. We offered, I think it was at least 4 times during the day, a session on social media safety for school-aged youth. This session was one of our top 2 popular choices this year based off of the assessment data from the unconference. Teachers provided more comments on this session than anything else that they attended. And then Mr. August has been working with the FBI to set up staff sessions that are for all of our staff members in the middle and high school. Those will come later this academic year. And he's also been working to schedule assemblies for our middle school and high school students on internet safety. And we just found out from Mrs. M, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher saying your last name, an opportunity for another organization to partner with, the Children's Advocacy Center of Franklin County. So I'm looking forward to learning more from them about what they could offer at Shippensburg. Are there any questions or concerns on this?
I would just follow up and say Mrs. Luffy has got it scheduled for the 28th for students, and then some additional training for staff on the 2nd of both of those are in April. And we're still working on the middle school timing.
You said you talked about it. What's that talk? Is that just like we hear now, just a mention, or are you actually physically teaching the kids?
They are going in and they are teaching the students what to do in these situations, what does it look like, again, those role-playing scenarios. They're going through each year and adding a little more depth to the topics in a way that is age appropriate.
So how often is that done?
Well, the specials are approximately 37 days in the middle school. In the elementary school, it's probably a total of, depending on the grade, anywhere from 5 lessons a year to 10 lessons a year, depending on grade.
What's the possibilities of taking that 30 minutes we were going to lose a change in time schedule and using that to teach the kids on that?
My understanding.
Somewhere between 30. It was 20 and 30 minutes we were going to lose the educational time if we changed the time starting. Could we use that 30 minutes to do something? I don't know. The past couple of weeks I've heard like 4 different more episodes of this whole ordeal, and it just seems like it's getting worse. My wife just told me before I come to the meeting tonight about one that was in Louisiana that happened in 23, I think it was, where it was just like the predator was after him, got him, and got, it was after his brother and his cousin, and it was just, it was just an ongoing thing. So on the way up here, I thought, well, we were going to lose 30 minutes of instruction time. We were going to change the time. Could we use that time to, I don't know, just a thought when I was coming up the road.
No, I appreciate that because I know time is a very finite resource that we have for the different educational standards that we need to get through from the state. And we also want to make sure that we are taking care of and protecting our students to every degree possible. So as we're building schedules and for the different buildings, that is something we could always look at of how do we build time in for these types of lessons.
All right.
Do you want to, I'm looking at my calendar here. There's a internet safety presentation for families and community on the 18th as well.
That's a community presentation. I think Mr. August could speak more to that.
I'm just
doing.
Giving
We
you
did
an
a social
avenue to
media
give a
bump on
plug
it
for it,
today,
yeah.
and I believe sent out an email to everyone just as a reminder. We had done it a couple weeks ago, but sent it out again since we're within a week of it.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Danette. Superintendent's report.
No donation report. I do have the enrollment report. We are still flirting with the 3,700, which is kind of where we have been for a while. The elementaries have a total of 1,172 students from K to 3. SACE has 555 as of this writing. Secondary schools, the middle school has 853 students, and the high school is at 1099 with 19 at outside placements for a grand total of 3,698 students, 258 students in cyber charter, and 243 in our Keola program at this time. Oh, and I just wanted to throw out that I was able to attend the musical and was really impressive. They did a fantastic job. So, a lot of really good songs I'd never heard before.
That kindergarten number, has that gone down?
So I just looked at it today. Yeah, there's minor fluctuations. We're 1 or 2 in like grade levels. I think we lost a couple students in Nancy Grace in 3rd grade, which we were excited about, just given the class sizes there. So yes, that number is the kindergarten number, and for the board, just a reminder: 1st, 2nd, and 3rd are the bubble that we have to deal with in the system, and we will know if that is a bubble or a trend once we get kindergarten numbers for this year. So we're poised to meet the needs at SACE when this 3rd grade group attends there, with the addition of that an additional elementary position, and we need to take care of 3rd grade at Grayson to get their number to be a little more comfortable. So those are 2 things that we're working on, in this budget.
I may have asked this before, but that bubble, is that easier to manage once we get them into middle and high school?
I would say no. When one of the great things about G Blues for us is that it takes anywhere from 20 to 24 students out of our K to 5 buildings that we have. That ends in 5th grade. So I was just tracking that out in an enrollment spreadsheet this afternoon. So down the line, not only do we have to plan for, the facilities 5-year plan, we have to plan for the personnel 5-year plan. And again, I was working from the predictive enrollment analysis data that we had. There was maybe a little bit of a glitch in it, I saw, but there is capacity, as the predictions behind the bubble kind of smooth out and decrease. There's an opportunity where it's not necessarily we meet the need, not necessarily with new hires, but with some shifting of positions internally. So you don't know until you get the actual numbers. But I was beginning. I'd already had been mapping out the near future. I've extended it out. By 2032, that bubble will hit the high school, and we'll have to see what that looks like. But that's a ways off.
It brings me a little comfort to know that these things are being thought about, and even if it's
obsessed with, I think is probably
okay.
a better. Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda. We have item 4A, approval of minutes from the February 24th, 2025 board meeting. We have the finance report, including the bills of payment, the budget reports. Item 4C is the revised school calendar. 4D, the Shippensburg Area High School Prom, which will take place on May 3rd. 4E, the Partnership for Better Health. Leslie DeLong, Assistant Superintendent, is seeking retroactive approval for the grant participation with the Greyhound Foundation of $5,000. Item 5F is the appointment of school dentist, Dr. Michael Morehouse. 4G, we have the personnel, professional, and support staff to include retirements, which include Mr. Bob McCurdy, the first grade teacher at James Byrd, along with resignations of support staff, substitutes, and resignations. Is there a motion to approve items 4A through 4G?
Red Skull, make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion?
I saw that the DJ at the prom is DJ Donovan, and I wondered if that was our own Mr. Donovan.
Definitely is not.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 4H is administration recommends approval of the following new appointment. It's Eric Day for Assistant Business Administrator at the Shippensburg Area School District at an annual salary of $82,500 effective March 17th. The new position job description to be approved on the March 10th board agenda. Is there a motion to approve item 4H?
So move.
Motion made by Mr. Carey, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Noggle. Discussion?
Yeah, I don't agree with this, with the price increase. I mean, we had somebody here work for quite a few years and didn't offer her any more money. It's just, I'm not saying we don't need the position, but it's just, I don't know, the price increase I got a little bit of issue with.
Mr. Barwin, can you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Kirk Noggle,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
No.
Mr. Mike Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Darren Donovan,
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no, motion passes.
The action agenda, item 5A, grant approval for the high school, middle school, G Blues, and Nancy Grayson. The Greyhound Foundation seeks approval to disperse $9,000 or $2,250 for the above-mentioned schools for the unfunded mandate for PBIS programming. Is there a motion to approve item 5A?
Red Skull, make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott,
Second.
second by Mr. Bard. Discussion?
Just keep putting unfunded mandate in there. I like that.
The other thing I would add is I think you could say this at every one of our meetings, but it's again a thank you to the folks at the Greyhound Foundation for all of their continued efforts to help us with our things just like this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5B, the confidential employee handbook. Administration recommends approval of the attached confidential handbook effective February 15th and will need to be reviewed again by June 30th, 2026. Is there a motion to approve item 5B?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Donovan, second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5C, the Assistant Business Administrator job description. Administration recommends approval of the Assistant Business Administrator job description. While we do not have the complete PASBO efficiency study back, PASBO has recommended our accounting comptroller position be transitioned to a Assistant Business Administrator position. Is there a motion to approve item 5C?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Donovan, second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Goetz. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
Roll call?
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Kirk Noggle,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
This is for the position. This
This
is
is the job description.
yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
No.
Mr. Mike Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Darren Donovan,
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no, motion passed.
5D, armed security at sporting events. It's the recommendation of the Safety and Security Committee for the district to have an armed security person at home varsity sporting events that include, but not necessarily limited to, football, basketball, and wrestling. The cost for one individual would be approximately $8,000 per year, and PCCD grant monies and/or the general fund would be the funding sources. Is there a motion to approve item 5D?
Red Scott make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion?
Yeah, so I assume there was some discussion of this last time, as it was probably on the discussion agenda, but I wasn't here, so I apologize for that. But could someone speak to why?
Safety.
Maybe with a few more words.
Today's society requires safety, and everything we can do with children's safety is important, in my estimation. And if you go to any other school district, any other event, especially varsity, they have at least one armed security person there. That's why I made the recommendation to the safety committee.
Okay, so explain to me just how it works. Is this going to be provided with by our current security contractors?
That was
That's
my
my understanding is yes, and they would even try to keep individuals that are at the certain buildings would follow through at those buildings as well. Like whoever's stationed at the high school during the day would also be at these events to try to keep this familiar faces in same buildings.
And so my understanding then is that we're compensating this person more because they're carrying a firearm.
It's outside the contracted hours of that agreement, Dr. Goetz. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is this really what every other school district does? Are we the only school district that doesn't have armed
District?
security guards?
District? I think even James Buchanan has one. Greencastle has, Chamberburg has 7, Central Dauphin has 4, Carlisle has 6. You want to continue on? There's nobody around here that doesn't have an armed security at a sporting events.
I was gonna say, even at Gettysburg, for
Yeah.
like these little youth leagues, they have at least 3 security guards just walking around the track at the top, and there are people around.
Security guards who are armed?
I don't know. They're like the G-Force people. I mean, I know we have some here, but I'm gonna assume that they do too. So, like those type of people.
What's the use of having them there if you're not going to be armed?
Wow.
Everybody has a cell phone. You can just have anybody at the door saying, call the police. That's not the point. The point is to have immediate protection for our students and our kids and their families at an event.
I guess the question I have is, this is not necessarily limited to football, basketball, wrestling. I get the idea of it, and I'm not opposed to it. But like, how do we know? Is it every single varsity event, or is that the discretion of like an administrator that says like, obviously when we have a Friday night football game, there's 3,000 people there or 2,000, whatever it is. Like there's a ton of people in a big open outdoor space, which we typically anyway, we did have. I mean, it's routine for our local police officers to make an appearance at some varsity events, you know, whether that's football or basketball or whatever. But I'm just thinking, like, if there's a volleyball game at 4 o'clock, like, are we gonna have this for that, or?
I think, you know, we are probably limited by the availability of what G-Force can provide.
Yeah.
So I think.
Wasn't there a subscription? Didn't you put down what events you, or the safety committee put down what events they wanted covered? It wasn't every event.
I think.
Not limited to, so there's that discretion
Yeah.
of.
I think the thinking from the safety committee is, my understanding was, you know, football, basketball, and wrestling were the big ones. The indoor ones,
I did have one question. I was in here this winter for a swim meet that I think was sponsored by whoever the club is, not by the high school. And our security guy was in here with that, roaming around on Saturdays. Are we paying for that, or do they help out, or how does that work?
That was the swim club, and they paid for that.
They paid for
themselves.
that. Okay, very good. Thank you.
So just a question about the funding. So help me understand the grant. And I mean, I can, it's easy to imagine that, a grant is available for like the first year, but like, will this grant be available in perpetuity? Or is this something that like, we're going to have to begin to pay for eventually?
We may have to pay for it eventually. The grant isn't there. But
I believe that's even a possibility this coming up year now. Like that, I don't think that grant's guaranteed. In my opinion, though, I mean, we got like a 70-something odd $1 million budget, $8,000 a year to take an extra step to make sure we have a armed guard at an event in case that, crazy incident happens. We can say we at least did our part to put an armed guard in that situation.
Do we have other security at sporting events? I know we have in the past. Is this going to replace them, or do we continue a contract with somebody else?
So we still have our own event staff people, and I think we would want to still keep them because they are still doing crowd control and, monitoring the situation, but they're not armed. They're our own staff members, but they know the students and they are trained to, watch out for danger. But this would be another layer of support.
Well, I mean, if a teacher was helping out or at an event there and got hurt, would we cover them on workman's comp?
Yes. If
I had no problem with that. I think we should. I had no problem
if
with
they
that.
were working there?
Yes, at the event.
Yeah.
And so if they did get hurt, we'd have to find a substitute for them.
If they were an event staff person?
Yes.
Yes.
The teacher. And so that's a cost that could incur by having them do that without any help. I'm saying the teacher went to break up a fight or people get injured, then they're off school, then we have to get a substitute. This way we have an armed security. You can call him or her, and they can take care of it. And if they get hurt, it doesn't affect the school district. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, we do provide all of our event staff people with walkie-talkies, so they're able to communicate with one another at the larger events.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Goetz, I could write it into the PCCD grant for coverage. It's my understanding that the grant funding should be level again this upcoming school year. And because it's an unbudgeted expense, it could qualify. But like you said, if the grant money runs out, then we would have to make a decision whether or not we would want to fold it into the regular budget.
Well, the way the motion reads, it says grant monies and or general fund, so whatever, I guess.
The preference would be grant funds.
Wanting it to say grant monies.
No, I'm not. No, not necessarily. I just, whatever. So, I get it. I don't like it. I get it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5E, contracted people transportation request for proposals, RFP revised. Administration recommends approval of the attached request for proposal draft and to advertise for contracted pupil transportation. The district's current vendor's contract to transport students of Shippensburg Area School District will expire at the end of the 24-25 school year. Is there a motion to approve item 5E?
I make a motion to table.
Mr. Noggle has made a motion to table. Is there a second?
Red Scott seconds.
Mr. Scott, second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Mike Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
this is to table this?
This is to
correct?
table.
No.
Dr. Nathan Goetz?
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirk Noggle?
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Darren Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly?
No.
7 yes, 2 no.
So, Mr. President, would the president entertain a motion on this item now, or do we need to wait to have something else on the?
I will always entertain me.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we empower the administration to negotiate a 1-year extension, if possible, with our current transportation provider, and to schedule an RFP advertisement for the beginning of the school year, this upcoming school year, which would be for the 26-27 school year.
Correct.
And I would just say the bus contract is kind of hanging out there. Just as a reminder.
So what you're saying is there is a sense of urgency that we engage in some sort of conversation to figure out what's going to happen next year.
We do, the administration does need direction on how to secure transportation for this upcoming school year.
I mean, based on the wording of the motion that Dr. Goetz just made, does that give you that?
That would give the.
Okay.
I'll second that then.
All right, so Dr. Goetz has made a motion for a 1-year extension of the current contract and for an RFP advertisement for the 26-27 school year. And that was seconded by Mr. Carey. So now, Mr. Barwin, could you do a roll call, please?
Okay. Mr. Carey?
Yes.
Mr. Kressler?
Yes.
Dr. Goetz?
Yes.
Dr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Noggle?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Bard?
Yeah.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Eberly?
Yes.
9 yes, motion passes.
All right. Item 5F, the mid-state change order. Facilities Committee recommends approval of the change order for the electrical work to be completed to meet electrical code requirements for the middle school, high school. It is a cost of $31,129 and will be an added cost to the project and will be paid out of the middle school, high school project. Is there a motion to approve item 5F?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Noggle, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5G, the mid-state change order, PCO number 2. Facilities Committee recommends the attached change order for the electrical work to be completed to run fiber cable to the scoreboard. The change order includes work outside the scope of the district's capabilities and excluded by the scoreboard supplier. There'll be a cost of $12,787. Is there a motion to approve item 5G?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Noggle, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5H is the UGI relocation of the gas line. Facilities Committee recommends approval of the required relocation of the gas line near the barn along Everly Drive. The relocation is required as the depth of the gas line is insufficient where the new parent loop is being added and will cost $8,531.92, and the quote is attached. Is there a motion to approve item 5H?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Noggle, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion?
I just quick clarifying question. On the first two of these, the wording was that the funds would come from the stadium project construction budget, and then on this gas line one, it says it's an added cost. Is that because in the first two, it's in that line item where we have funds set aside for some overages, and is this one different, or is it just a semantics thing?
Mr. Lynn, can you speak to that, please?
I guess we'll take them in order. The first one, which is the change order for EC, that is part of the middle school, high school. There are funds in that balance that will cover that change order. The second one, which is for the scoreboard, that is to run the fiber from the press box to the scoreboard itself. That is also in the fund due to the fact that we're getting a $15,000 credit back from the scoreboard supplier. So it's pretty much we're going to be able to offset with existing cost. The last one is the gas line. That was an unknown. It does show the gas line in the drawings, but does not show the depth. So when UGI came in to inspect it prior to work being done, they found that they need to drop it approximately 3 feet where the existing parent loop or the new parent loop will come out to Eberly Drive. So basically, they're going to have to take 40 feet of gas line, drop it 3 feet, and then allow us to bring that road out. That was funds that was not accounted for. And at this point, we'll probably have to come out of either fund balance or excess of the project, but don't know that we have excess in the project this early in the project.
So just technically, remember the bid for that project was 10 million plus. The actual cost is under 7 million. So, from the approved budget, there is room there. I mean, nobody likes paying change orders, but it's still within the budgets approved by the board.
I just want to make sure I understood all the language there. Thank you.
One more, hold on, don't run away. Don't run away. You know. It should have been done when we did before the project. I mean, my concern was
Which one are you talking about?
gas line.
The gas line was an unknown. It does not show the depth on the drawing.
On the drawing, but who made the drawing?
The gas line people.
So
it does not. All it says in any of their drawings is that there's a gas line there. It does not specify the depth of the gas line. They have to be at a minimum 18 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's about 3 feet. Because we're putting a road over top of it, it has to be at a 6-foot level. So where they've got it existing coming down Everly in front of the barn where there's not a road, didn't matter. Now that we want to put a road across it, it has to be lowered.
Okay.
Can I just ask you one quick question since we're on the parent loop stuff? How are we doing on our timeline for that?
We're getting tight. Right now, the estimated completion of everything is August 9th of all construction, then with some final permitting and everything. Still looks like we'll be completed before the start of the school year.
Gotcha.
But
I haven't been here for like a week, but I came here tonight and there's like a whole bunch of bricks out back. So
yeah, we're ready for
moving
steel
fast
on
in
the
some
band
areas.
portion. So it's moving right along.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Did we vote? I don't think we voted on
I was just getting ready to say, okay. Any additional comments? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, discussion agenda. I'm going to read through the topics. So 6A is the senior class trip of 2025. 6B is a request to create an Instagram account for the Multicultural Club. 6C is the G Blues summer camps. 6D is the Camp G Blues 2025. 6E is the secondary curriculum courses. 6F is the memorandum of understanding between the Shippensburg School District and the SAESPA. 6G is the summer food service program and staffing for the 2025 school year. 6I is the appointment of insurance agent. 6J is the YBot wireless monitoring troubleshooting sensors for 2025. 6K are the battery backups from the CDWG mini bid. 6L is the Acer Chromebooks for the 2025-26 school year, and that is a cost of $163,500.
That is not, don't we do that anyway every so often?
We do. Yeah.
So this is not separate. This is just what go through rotation.
It's part of the normal replacement cycle, Mr. Scott.
Of the Chromebooks that, I loathe, but
Yep.
yes, the Chromebooks. 6M is the board committee restructuring, and that is the end of 6M.
I got the bucket truck.
What is mine? 6N is the 2001 bucket truck that Kirk was speaking about regarding that came out of facilities, and that cost is $8,000. Do you guys have comments? I know based on the committee of the whole, we did not have a chance to discuss the restructuring of the committee. So if you guys wanted to
Do you want to start with that or go with others? Because I have a bunch.
start at the top, Mr. Custom.
You got it. First, senior trip for the seniors. That's exciting. I mean, everybody gets excited about their senior trip. I'm looking at this. This looks like a really full day. Right? Like you're in Lancaster, and then you're ending up at King of Prussia, and then Six Flags Great Adventure. Has anyone been to Shady Maple? Because I don't know if going there and eating and then going to Six Flags in the same day is the best idea. But hey, to each their own. Best of luck to all those kids and teachers going along. But so that was my first comment, because it
Critical
does seem
thinking
like a
on that.
really full day. But
Really full in a lot of different ways.
yeah, typically you tap out for the day after a trip to Shady Maple. The G Blues camp, I think in the past we've had like G Blues students and teachers have come and given like a report on that, because I think it's a super cool thing that they're able to do there. So I was just curious if we could maybe look into that at some point.
It's on the agenda.
Perfect.
For future consideration.
Knock that out.
Also, I'm available to be invited again. So if anyone cares to invite me, please.
6F, just to make sure I'm sure, the summer hours, that's still giving his staff, the support staff, I think, like 3 options to work in the summertime?
Correct.
Okay, so I read that correctly. That's good. 6L, those Chromebooks, which I'm not a huge fan of either, but I think one thing to point out is starting, I believe it's next year, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. August, but starting next year, all PSSAs in the state of Pennsylvania have to be taken online, which I personally don't like the idea of. But that is something that, like, again, it's probably an unfunded mandate. You could probably put that on there, because it really, if you're giving all these kids tests across entire grade levels, they probably need a Chromebook.
There's substantial savings to the state to do them online.
Yeah, then give us those savings. And that's it for that. And then I just have about the board restructure, but if anybody else has anything.
What do you have about the board restructuring?
I just had, okay, I just had a question. I know as a group here, we've talked about the FEC. I'm just curious, like, how we got to the other two, what those other two look like, what they entail. Like, what's the kind of goals on that? I mean, I lost it. Like curriculum and student engagement, like, what does that look like? Programming and planning. I think you touched on that a little bit, saying like, hey, we want to maybe look a 5-year plan on our facilities or our budget and tax increase or whatever that may be. So I'm just curious if someone can give me some more details on number 8 and number 9 on there.
I'll start it off, I guess. Curriculum and student engagement, it kept coming up about whether we're addressing mental health, and that's a topic we didn't feel that was to be left alone, and we tried to figure out where does that go. And we also thought we never as a board really have a chance to talk about curriculum and where we're headed directions. You know, it is a school, and that's like the last thing as a board we ever talk about. Figured that would be an open opportunity to do that for both those. The programming and planning pretty much is, you know, if we're looking at space, property, where do we move next? What do we use? You know, could we move people out of the administrative building, the business building, and then what can we use that for? I mean, there's planning ahead when you're looking down the road at where is it you want to get to. That's just, these are just opportunities for those topics to be met and held to discuss moving forward. You know, whether they get approved, whether they get scheduled, whether they get added on, and whether the chair chooses to want a group to go just talk about some of these items to give us some direction. We could meet as a board, have that discussion as a committee of the whole, and decide if we want to break that out, get all the ideas on the table, and then say, hey, can you focus on this part and move forward? It was just options.
Okay.
That's really what it was.
I don't want to repeat everything Mr. Carey said, but I'll just kind of give my take on both of them. So I think we've talked a lot about the fiscal efficiency committee. I think people understand that. Ms. Wolfinger's in the audience. So, you know, there's been a lot of push to get mental health in a committee. I think we felt like that made more sense as if it was an ad hoc committee, it would potentially go away, and we wanted it to be a permanent part of a committee. And with I know the superintendent and the profile of a grad, like one of his big pushes is student engagement. And we felt like that title really spoke to making sure that our students are engaged with the curriculum and that things like mental health aren't impairing their capacity to be engaged with our curriculum. So I would say that committee should focus on curriculum, but with the added mission of dealing with some of the other things like mental health or other issues that may come up that would diminish a student's capacity to engage with the curriculum.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking the question, because I had some notes here of, I think the goal was to reduce the number of committees and time spent, and it's like the task was to go out to decrease, and we come back with 2 more.
Yes. But the idea is they're called upon as needed, almost all of them, other than the ones that are scheduled, the first 3 that are in there. So you may have some of those not meeting often or most of the year, which gives us time to explore some of these other issues that we never get to talk about. That's really, it was just creating opportunity. It's not, it certainly was to minimize the amount of times we meet and use the committee as a whole, generally speaking, for these groups to present or bring something up. But you can't get work done with 9 people at the table once you have a task and need to go find out. I mean, to sit down and talk about policy and iron out the wording, I don't want 9 people giving their opinions on what their policy should read like. I don't want, 9 opinions on a lot of things. That's the point of the committees, in my mind. I think you get more quality work done, but it has to be at the direction of the board saying, hey, we want some information 5 years down the road on what we can do here, what we can do here, what we can do here. Could you go search this or look into it? And we'll give you a couple months to do that. Come back, give your report to the board. So hopefully it's a tool for you and Darren, moving forward, or whoever the board presidents are, out ahead.
So I think one suggestion I would have regarding the curriculum and student engagement, there's no better person to ask of what can I do to make you engage than to have like the students at the table. So I think that while we have like student representatives at this meeting, I would like to see some of our students selected from multiple of the buildings, which I know would result in parents transporting kids to meetings, but at all grade levels, like what can we do better to help you retain and to become engaged? Is there something that we are doing? What can we do better? And what are we doing right that we could do more of? So I would maybe like to see some student engagement on that number 8 under the curriculum and student engagement, just to get some feedback and to make that more engaging for the students to have a voice in what their curriculum and what their day looks like.
I think that's pretty dope.
Thanks. And I also, with some of these ad hoc committees, I know we're not using the word ad hoc, but they really are. But the increase in advertising costs, we'll have to be like mindful of when we schedule that, because it's not like we can schedule, it's a Monday, we can't just schedule it for a Thursday, but you
Correct.
have to be strategic with that planning.
That
So just to
still
be
felt, we didn't attach the whole policy, but that addresses, I think, in the rest of the policy. Most didn't change much other than a little bit of the terminology. The rest of the principle is still there.
Okay.
Maybe one more thing, because it's for consideration, about maybe doing first meeting of the month being committee of the whole, the second being the voting only, like the planning action. And I know other people do it. I just know that from time to time we've had, especially when you get to like maybe August and school starting and you have a little bit of a rush on like, hey, we got a teacher hire late. Like, what happens if we go that route? What happens if you get to a position where like you need to make a hire, but it's supposed to only be a committee of a whole, but we need board approval for a teacher to start?
So my understanding and looking at it from other districts, it's planned out to make sure that you have everybody ready to go. I'm sure there's some retro that happens, but I also think that there could be consent agenda items. If we so choose to have personnel be something that we could vote on at every meeting. I mean, that's not really requires discussion or.
Gotcha.
I don't know if this is the forum for those last items under for consideration, whether we want to have a retreat to talk about this or not. One of the reasons I didn't feel comfortable about making a full recommendation out of the policy committee is I don't think when we moved to the current model, I'm not certain that I was on the board, and I know Dr. Goetz played a role in coming up with that model, and I just felt like I wanted feedback from the whole board before we did that, and we just need to decide what forum we want to have that discussion.
So I did check with the solicitor just to confirm. So if we have a board retreat, it would be to receive information or training in regard to board structure, committee structure,
No deliberation.
and ask questions, but we wouldn't be able to deliberate in that forum.
Okay.
Any additional discussion on discussion items?
Just one more clarifying. Sorry, Mr. Carey.
Oh,
This is a discussion item. I think if we approve this next meeting, I know that Mr. Noggle is interested in getting this fiscal efficiency committee going. I think it would, at that point in time, we would need to, if we're going with the model that we talked about in the policy committee, it would be kind of up to the board leadership to say we're essentially giving the fiscal efficiency committee a task. This is what we want them to do, and this is how long we're expecting it to be done. And then they would report back periodically or at the end of that task. Am I understanding that intent correctly, Mr. Carey?
correct.
Okay. And that would kind of be the model for any of these committees. They're generally supposed to be a committee of the whole thing unless there's some time-limited, task-limited
Correct.
task that they would carry on in a subcommittee.
That's what's supposed to make it a time saver, is most of the general stuff should get done at a committee of the whole. If you have special tasks that need accomplished, you assign them and they go get them done.
Just a question from the superintendent in terms of structure. So does the committee of the whole then have a section for facilities, and then all of these committees are populated, and then individual items that need discussed are placed in those? You know, basically we have the opportunity in a committee of the whole to address any action that may come through the administration that would have gone to a committee, and it's placed on there.
The only suggestion I have on that, if I think I understand what you're talking about, is I would think whoever's the chair of any of those committees either has something to bring, or the chair or assistant chair has something to request. That's how it gets on the agenda if they have something for that coming week or whatever it is. Otherwise, you know.
So I think that was the other question, is assigning. So now instead of assigning to 6 committees, we're assigning individuals to 9 committees, just in case a task is assigned. So then, is that how it's going to work? Like, everyone is going to be assigned to probably 3 or 4 of these subcommittees that would take place during the committee of the whole? Or is everyone expected to be at the committee of the whole?
Yeah, I'm expecting.
Everybody's expected to be at the committee of the whole.
So one other question I think that I would have is during the committee of the whole, when we originally started this, was to hear from business administrators, to get our students in front of us, like the FFA time, like the Lego program and the different clubs, to hear about all of the great things and how this will maybe put a damper on the students and educators getting before the board if we're tasked with some of these meetings that we would typically have outside of a board meeting, and now we're having it here. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
That was the request.
That is, I mean, but that would be a downside, but I don't think all 9 have to do any kind of report or at every committee of the whole meeting. I'm hoping, my understanding when this was given to the policy committee was that we were trying to reduce the number of meetings that took place outside of this meeting, so that we weren't meeting multiple days a week, and since a lot of those committee meetings, public wasn't coming to anyway and wasn't very aware of. So that was sort of what I thought the goal was. But it does come with, your point is correct. I think it does potentially come with a downside of either longer committee of the whole meetings or less stuff that we're used to having in committee of the whole meetings.
any other comments, discussion?
For me, it's committee. I mean, we have committee meetings. No one shows up. It's just a few people on the board. I think too many things aren't available to the public. You have a committee meeting at the whole, people got the opportunity and go back and look and see something. We go to these committees. The committee's nice. Realistically, it's not functional for the community. I think I would like to get more. We have someone here at the community whole. If they can't attend, they can come back and see it. They got the opportunity to look it up. And for me, there's nothing important. Don't bring it. As Mr. Kerr said, everything doesn't have to come before us, but just specific things. For community, in the classrooms and that stuff, I think that'd be a part of it. But we got 2 meetings a month. I mean, 2 meetings a month. There's not enough space to put them in there.
I guess it all depends on, how much work there is. I mean, it never hurts, to try something new. And that's one thing, is like, we have the power to change it if we see that it's not working.
Correct.
So
And more than likely, if you haven't called for a group to meet, then there's nothing probably going to be brought before you. So the policy's soon done. Negotiations only whenever it happens. I was on 4 committees last year. This is probably going to be a break for me to go to this year.
True.
I think it's a good idea, just for simple fact, you can have whether it's a transportation director here, the athletic director, they can be here to answer any questions for everybody. Instead of at the committee, I mean, they run it anyhow. I mean, it's transportation, Randy runs that. You go to the athletics, Sarah runs that. I mean, there's really, the chairperson don't do nothing in them 2 committees, I know that.
It also,
report.
to Jim's point, it also means that our administrators who typically come to some of these meetings, they know it's just always going to be a Monday night thing. And so they're not coming out multiple nights a week either. So hopefully it'll reduce their stress.
Anything else?
That's all.
Sorry, I have a quick question. This is just me as a high school student athlete now. What is the deal with the lights for the stadium? I don't know. is that like next year? Is that like 2 years? I just wondering.
The lights.
So we expect we submitted a traffic study.
Yeah.
Borough put comments on that traffic study back to the group that we hired to do the traffic study. They have put together, so it's really about finding parking spots and where they could be on like our property that fits the code.
Yeah.
So that's what's been going on since that. I expect that report to go back to the borough tomorrow or this week. They will then review it again. I think you might have heard Mr. Noggle talk about a meeting with the borough to maybe hash out some of those things and open up some possibilities. And then from there, we'll have either met their requirements or not met their requirements, and then we find we have to find other solutions. So once the parking question has been answered, then we have to reapply for a land development, either resubmit one or modify one to allow the lights to go in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks.
So there's not, did I miss anything, Mr. Noggle?
Nope, we'll get there.
So I would say, in summary, we're probably as close as we've ever been, but there's still, the back and forth that has to happen.
So I love that question because, to most folks, you just kind of walk around, you're like, why don't they do this thing, right? And the they is like all these different organizations and municipalities and whatever trying to play nice together. So the answer to those questions should always be, it's way more complicated than you think it is.
Which is true of most things in life.
Yeah. Wait till you graduate.
Bottom line is the ball keeps moving. We think we're there, they move the ball a little further. We think we're there, the ball moves a little further. I don't know. After this last letter I received, I don't know if we'll ever catch up.
Mrs. Chair, 6E, secondary curricula courses. I'd looked through that today. I didn't see a cost attached to that. Do we know what, for all the art curricula?
Sure.
Maybe I can answer it. So there's the cost is we pay our teachers to write it.
Okay.
And then, if there's additional resources, it would come out of the curriculum budget for those departments.
Most of those I usually see like $8,000 or $12,000 attached, so that's refreshing to see that it's already taken care of.
You saw that our number one budget item was salaries, so we are paying for it.
Thank you.
All right, we have reached our citizens' comments regarding non-agenda items. I have 2 individuals, so please identify yourself by name, borough, or township. All comments to the board as a whole, and make sure they are in the form of a statement. Questions will be taken under advisement. Responses to questions will be offered after due deliberation and will be provided by the superintendent at the direction of the board within a few days of the board meeting. You'll be allowed 3 minutes for your comments, and comments relative to private student matters or personnel issues should be directed to the appropriate school authority outside of this meeting. So first up, we have Mrs. Macheski.
Just for every speaker, please don't give your home address.
Tricia Macheski, Shippensburg Township, Cumberland County, mother of Brady and Levi. Since I was here last, high school baseball season started. Go Hounds. An email reminder went out about the district's internet safety next week. April dates were announced for info sessions for high school faculty and students. I found an instructor from the Children's Advocacy Center who does prevention education for Franklin County and the surrounding areas. The Safety Matters curriculum that she teaches is part of Chambersburg School District's Student Health and Safety curriculum. She is eager and willing to be a free resource for our district too. Caverna High School in Kentucky lost a 16-year-old student on February the 28th. He was a victim of sextortion. His parents are also speaking out in hopes of preventing other families from experiencing our horror. About 3 hours ago, a story about sextortion featuring the beautiful life and tragic death of my youngest son, Levi, aired on the nightly news. Finally, I'd like to share an interaction from last week about a 5th grader who I'll refer to as John. John and I were sharing our wristful of bracelets, both sporting Levi's name and a few scriptures. He was excited to show me his newest one. John asked if I would mind using my phone to scan it so he could show me how it worked. Puzzled yet intrigued, I shared his enthusiasm and I held my phone to his bracelet. A notification was then sent to me. Clicking on it revealed a Bible verse set to music. I said, "Wow, John, how's that work?" He smiled and said, "I have no idea." I later ordered a few bracelets, thinking we could all use a little bit more Jesus in our lives. Stick with me, I promise it's relevant. I was tickled to be up to date on the newest trends since my kiddo said he'd already seen these online. When the package arrived, I addressed an envelope to send to my teenage nephew. I was putting the bracelet on and inadvertently read the first line of the enclosed instruction card that said, "Open TikTok." I was stunned and immediately outraged. At 48 years old, I fell into their trap. A bracelet that appears to be good was really a wide open invitation to TikTok. Satan put on a mask. I recall at the unconference training a law enforcement officer saying that TikTok is their worst nightmare. Of all people, I have reason to be vigilant. I lost my son to predators, and I fell hook, line, and sinker. I intended to read the Bible. I wasn't looking for a door to predators. Neither was my Levi. He was a victim. He didn't know what he didn't know. While I appreciate Dr. Donat's attempt to pull together the minuscule moments the topic of online safety is brought up in grades K to 8 and make it look like our district is doing all that they can, let me be clear, that was a Hail Mary. There is no set curriculum. Here's my point. Whether it's a phishing email, an online gaming partner, or scripture, evil wears a mask that we don't recognize and we aren't looking for. Most of us are not conditioned to be skeptical of everything we see. Neither are our children. They're hardwired to trust. Predators count on them being naive. Prevention education is critical and long overdue. In your portrait of a graduate, there are many statements on that document that apply to my point. Let me read one. Under responsible person, it says, has the knowledge and skills to live and thrive in a changing world. When over half of your student population owns a cell phone, and without any real curriculum that teaches online safety and digital citizenship, how will graduates be able to effectively do this? In your current comprehensive plan for the district, one of the action steps is about integrating social and emotional learning for students and staff. I would suggest this be a focus of the plan that is currently under construction as well. This goal has not been met, and in our rapidly changing world, it never will be. Please educate our students. Choose and implement an actual curriculum. I understand it's more complicated than it seems, but I would respectfully ask, what are you doing? Why are you waiting? Thank you.
Mrs. Kirkpatrick?
My name is Amanda Kirkpatrick. I'm the K-8 gifted teacher for the district. I'm also the middle school student council advisor, and I am mom to a 6th grader, a 9th grader, and a 10th grader, all boys. I'm also a former teacher of Levi's and a friend of the family. I'm thankful and grateful for the stadium that you guys are building so my boys can play soccer and can run track, hopefully next season. Classrooms are being added to the middle school right beside me so that the band kids have more space. There's additions happening at the high school, and I'm grateful very much for the security guards who have been added, especially at the middle school. They are making a positive presence. I'm thankful for the time and energy you all put into making sure our students, my 3 boys, have a safe educational journey with musical and athletic opportunities while in Shippensburg, which is the district that I grew up in. Tonight I'm asking you to please do what is needed next to continue to keep them safe, but not with security guards, with curriculum that will help them to learn how to navigate the world of social media and technology, a world that did not exist when I went to this school. I was going to share with you tonight some new research related to kids' usage in the digital world that was just released on February 26th by Common Sense Media. They are a nonprofit organization that provides the tools to make informed choices about media and technology. But after tonight's presentation, I have a few questions. It's concerning to me that as a teacher and a parent in the district that what was presented tonight was brand new to me. I did not know about that. So my questions are, what is the name of the curriculum that is being implemented and who is it created by? Where can we as parents see specifics on the lessons, as it was a broad list? I know in Chambersburg, one of my friends, their 2nd grader came home with a specific list of the topics and then additional talking points for the parents. Do we send those home? If so, my boys never brought any home. How are we assessing the learning that is occurring from the lessons? What kind of assessments are given so we know that they are taking in what we're asking them to take in? STEAM class in the middle school is 30-some days long, but they don't spend those 30 days on online safety. How many of those days do they spend on online safety? In the high school, it is an elective. It's a choice. It's not required. So my high school boys will have to take that elective in order to get the information that we would like them to get. If I have time, I will share the data that I was going to share quickly. 40% of children have a tablet by age 2. Nearly 1 in 4 have a personal cell phone by age 8. While the screen time remains steady at 2.5 hours per day, gaming has surged 65% in 4 years. We need to do more.
Thank you. Board comments, Mr. Noggle.
None.
Dr. Lyman.
Thank you to all of our community members. That was needed. This is a fun request. I know that we're going to have this brand spanking new turf field out here in the spring, and that there will be lots of teams wanting to use it. I'm assuming it will be used for some spring sports. Is that correct?
I've been checking the weather. Unfortunately, it has to be 50 degrees at night as well, and I haven't seen those temperatures.
Is that for the track? But for the field?
That's for track. That's to get the track down.
But for the field, will the field be used?
So we have to do the punch list yet to get that turned over to us. There's some things that need to be formally turned over via that construction process. Am I right, Mr. Linton? That should be happening soon, correct? The punch list.
So it may be able to be used some in the spring? Not, yeah, just the field.
I guess I don't know what events
But
have in the spring that would use this.
just like soccer.
Mr. Blunt.
There isn't varsity soccer in the spring.
There's middle school soccer. They're excited.
So what I would say is, as soon as it's turned over to us and we have availability for it and it's safe to go in and we know everything's the way it's supposed to be.
It would just be great if whatever teams would use, whatever sports would use a turf field and are playing in the spring, if they could have that opportunity, I think that would be great.
I don't want to commit to anything.
That's
I
fine.
learned that with construction, but I can't see why after the punch list is done, which I believe is happening soon, the field couldn't be used.
That's it.
Mr. Scott,
Nothing.
Mr. Carey,
Oh, ma'am.
Mr. Kressler.
I have two things that's more directed toward facilities. Earlier, Mr. Noel, you said the sprinkler system at Nancy Grayson was needed replaced or something.
Yes.
So
It's operational right now.
operational.
I'm sorry, fire alarm.
Okay. All right. Well, the last time we talked about sprinkler systems with renovations, it caused great heartburn for a lot of us
Sorry, I
at the middle
apologize
school.
if I
So
misspoke.
okay. So that's that one. Second is I know the facilities committee in the past has talked about basketball additions to the main gymnasium at the high school. Is there any update on that or? Sorry.
Good, make him get
I have reached out to two different companies. They're getting me pricing now to basically it would be add two because there are two existing that do not have the backboard and are not functional.
Okay.
It would be, and then relocating two. So basically the four outsides would be rotated so you could play half court.
Yep.
So I should be receiving pricing.
Gotcha. I know that
Yeah.
that came up sometime a couple months ago. I was just wondering if
Couldn't find anybody for a while.
that's all
The
good.
difficulty is making sure that we can get it scheduled in the small gap that we have after the ceiling comes down and the new ceiling comes back
Okay.
up again. So
Gotcha.
a lot's going to depend on their schedule.
Okay. My next one is Mr. Day was approved tonight. I think our board members that'll meet him here in the next couple weeks or whatever, I think you'll find him to be very sharp. Is like an understatement. And he's got all sorts of credentials to be in school business. But Mr. Carey and I served on that interview panel, and I think one thing that I think is always just a benefit to anybody who that we would hire, whether it's a teacher, coach, administrator, whatever, but he has like a tremendous passion, and he expressed that toward serving the community, serving in public education, and understanding that that position is like for the kids. So I just wanted to make note of that because I wrote that down the other day. Curtis, I'm sorry. I missed one. So we know about the track with the surface of the track. And we know the scoreboard, we've talked about that, whatever the line was from line to scoreboard or press box. What about like the throwing circles or stuff like the field events for the track?
There was a meeting to relocate those. We had to contact the conservation district. That's been back and forth. I think we're in the final stages of that. What the contractor would like to do is pour the concrete for it at the same time that he does the scoreboard.
Okay.
So we're hoping to have that back within the next week, and he can do all three of them at the same time.
Okay, that's fine. I just noticed like all of the dirt is moved. The mound is gone.
Again, we're kind of waiting on.
So I saw that, and then I was just started thinking about the field events, not just the track. And speaking of like track and spring sports, when I pulled in tonight, outside of seeing all the construction like going up seemingly fast in the back, right as I pulled in the parking lot, I heard I think it would have been the JV baseball team was out here today. Was that right?
Yes.
The JV baseball team, right as I pulled in, window down, heard the ball hitting the aluminum bat. Like super exciting. I don't know. I'm a sports geek, so I was excited about that. Hearing that. Good luck to all of our student athletes who have started their fall or spring seasons. That's it.
Mr. Bard?
None.
Dr. Goetz?
Nothing.
Mr. Donovan? I don't have anything this evening either. So some information date savers. March 12th, Athletics Committee. March 20th, Facilities. March 24th, Committee of the Whole. Planning and Action. March 13th, Outrageous at the high school from 5:30 to 7, and Coffee House that same evening at 7 p.m. March 18th is the Internet Safety Presentation at 6:30 in the Shippensburg Area Senior High School Auditorium. March 20th is the Evening of Jazz at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. And spring break is April 18th through the 21st, no school for the district. And May 26th is Memorial Day.